Tonight we step quietly inside a sealed room of clay, dust, and royal memory. In 1906, archaeologists working in southern Iraq began uncovering tablets from the ancient city of Nippur, a place once sacred to the Sumerians. Scholars connected to the University of Pennsylvania studied many of these finds, and among them were fragments of a strange royal tradition. It was not a story told in smooth lines. It was a list, a cold, careful list of kings, cities, reigns, and vanished authority. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the night gathers around you, tell us where you are listening from, and what time it is there. Perhaps you're in a quiet apartment at midnight. Perhaps dawn is touching your window. Either way, the tablets are waiting. You stand in imagination at the entrance of a forbidden library. The air is still. The walls hold the faint smell of baked earth, old reeds, and lamp smoke. Somewhere in the dark, a clay tablet rests on a shelf, smaller than a human hand, yet heavier than a crown. Its marks are pressed into the surface with a reed stylus, each wedge-shaped line holding a name that once mattered. The library is not forbidden because a guard stands at the door. It is forbidden because it asks questions too old for easy answers. Who were the first kings of Sumer? Why did some reign for tens of thousands of years? Why did scribes preserve such impossible numbers with such patience? And why does the record seem less like a simple list of rulers, and more like a coded memory of descent? You move deeper, slowly. The floor feels cool beneath your feet. Fine dust lifts at each step, floats in the air like pale ash from a world that has finished burning. On the shelves, tablets lean against one another in rows. Some are broken, some are darkened by age. Some carry signs so sharp that you almost imagine the scribe has just left the room. Records confirm that the Sumerians created one of the earliest known systems of writing. Their script began as practical marks for goods, labour, offerings, and storage. Then, almost quietly, it became a tool for memory, grain, cattle, temple duties, taxes, hymns, and royal names entered the clay. Humanity learned to trap time in mud. That is the respectable doorway. Yet the forbidden library does not remain respectable for long. In one shadowed corner lies the tradition known today as the Sumerian King List. Modern scholars have studied it as royal ideology, political memory, and mythic history. It names cities where kingship supposedly rested. It says authority descended from heaven. It moves from city to city like a flame passed between hands. But it also speaks of kings who ruled for spans that seem almost cosmic. 28,000 years, 36,000 years, 43,000 years. A single reign becomes longer than many civilizations. You feel the numbers settle around you, enormous and stringent. They do not behave like ordinary history, they behave like a door. Perhaps that's why some people imagine these tablets as something stranger. A fringe tidbit often whispered around the subject is that the King List might preserve an ancient memory of altered bloodlines, celestial ancestry, or beings who lived outside normal human limits. It is not a mainstream conclusion. It is not proven by bones, tombs, or genetic tests. Still, the idea lingers because the tablets themselves are unusual enough to invite dreams. And dreams have always gathered around Sumer. You pause beside a table where a broken tablet lies under lamplight. Its surface is the colour of dried riverbank. You cannot read the signs, yet you can feel the intention behind them. Someone wished the names to survive. Someone believed the sequence mattered. Someone wanted later generations to know that kingship had a beginning. And the beginning was not merely human. The room seems to breathe. A soft wind slips through a crack high in the wall. It carries the scent of salt marsh and distant river water. Beyond the library, you can almost sense the old southern landscape. Mud brick cities rise from flat land, canals shine beneath the sun, reeds bend along the marshes, workers lift baskets of clay, priests climb temple steps, Scribes sit cross-legged with tablets drying beside them. Everything is practical. Everything is sacred. A king in Sumer was not only a man with a weapon and a throne, he was a point of connection between city, temple, field, and God. His body mattered because his office mattered. His name mattered because the city's order depended upon it. To remember the king was to remember the shape of the world. And yet, there is a quiet scholarly debate about what the earliest names in the king list actually preserve. Some historians see mythic time, not literal reigns. Others suggest that older oral traditions were folded into later political claims. A few careful voices ask whether dynastic memory, ritual symbolism, and real rulers have become inseparable in the clay. That uncertainty is the doorway you pass through. You are not looking for a simple answer. You're looking at the way ancient people arrange the past. You're watching them turn memory into structure. The Sumerian King List is not a family tree in the modern sense, and certainly not a genetic record as a laboratory would define it. There are no sarans beneath glass, no sequencers hum in blue light, no scientist lifts a vial and announces the blood of kings. Still, the tablets behave like records of transmission. Kingship passes, names descend, cities inherit power. Divine favour moves through the human world as though carried by an invisible line. The scribes did not write of chromosomes, but they wrote of succession. They did not know modern biology, but they understood continuity. They knew that authority could be born, claimed, adopted, stolen, or remembered. That is close enough to disturb the sleep. In the Forbidden Library, the phrase DNA records becomes a metaphor with teeth. It suggests not laboratory proof, but cultural inheritance. The code is not hidden in cells, it is hidden in lists, numbers, repetitions, and sacred claims. It survives in the stubborn belief that rulers are never simply rulers. They come from somewhere, they carry something, they continue something older than themselves. A small lamp flickered. For a moment, the tablet seems almost alive. Not alive like flesh, of course. Clay is patient, clay waits, but the writing holds a pulse of human insistence. Each sign says, remember this. Each king name says, do not let the chain break, and each impossible reign says, ordinary time is not enough for what we are trying to explain. You might smile a little at that. Ancient bureaucracy, apparently, could be just as dramatic as any modern office. Someone, somewhere, still had to make the list, and someone still had to decide which king belonged, which city came first, and which version of memory would become official. Even eternity needed an editor. The thought is gently absurd, yet the feeling does not vanish. Beneath the dry humour is something older and colder. If a civilization writes that kingship descended from heaven, then history begins with an arrival. If it lists rulers from a time beyond normal human scale, then memory begins in a mist. If it preserves the sequence through centuries, then the list is not merely decoration, it is a structure of belief. You continue through the dim aisles. The shelves narrow, the curtains thickens. Outside, the world of modern certainty fades a little. You are left with clay, darkness, and the faint scrape of a reed stylus in your mind. The Forbidden Library does not tell you that the kings were gods. It does not prove that ancient blood carried impossible secrets. It simply places the record in your hands and lets the question deepen. Long before recorded history became comfortable, someone imagined a chain of rulers stretching back into forgotten time. In that chain, humanity appears both central and small. Kings rule cities, yet kingship comes from elsewhere. Names are written by human hands, yet the origin is placed above the human world. Perhaps this is the first hidden truth. Not that the tablets contain modern DNA, but that ancient people were already searching for the code of power. They were asking where authority begins. They were asking why one person commands and another obeys. They were asking whether the human story starts with farmers, temples, and kings, or with something remembered only as descent from the sky. The lamp grows softer. The tablet remains, and in the hush of that clay room, you begin to understand why the library feels forbidden. It is not because it gives an answer too dangerous to speak. It is because it preserves a question too ancient to close. Your mind drifts away from the sealed room and settles beneath an older moon, where the land itself seems half awake. The southern plain of Mesopotamia opens in the dark, low and wide, with marsh water breathing under the stars. Reeds stand in thick black clusters. Frogs pulse somewhere in the wet distance. The air tastes of salt, clay, fish, and smoke from small cooking fires. This is the world of Eridu. The city rises almost shyly from the edge of water, not yet grand in the way later cities dream of being grand. Its buildings are made from mud brick, shaped by hands, dried by sun, and slowly worn by wind. Nothing here looks eternal at first glance. Walls soften, corners crumble, floors vanish beneath newer floors. Yet beneath this fragile surface lies one of humanity's oldest urban memories. Archaeologists from the British School of Archaeology in Iraq and later university researchers studied Eridu for its long temple sequence. They found that sacred buildings had been rebuilt again and again on the same mound. Each new temple rested upon the ghost of an older one. The pattern suggests continuity, patience, and a ritual attachment to place. Human beings kept returning to the same sacred center, as though the ground remembered them. You feel that under your feet. The soil is not silent, it is layered. Every step presses down upon centuries of ash, broken pottery, reed matting, fish bones, and fallen brick. This is not the bright marble world of later empires. This is earlier, damper, cell. Here, civilization smells like marsh mud and drying grain. It sounds like sandals sucking free from wet ground. It glows with the low orange light of lamps shielded from the wind. Eridu was associated in later tradition with great antiquity. Sumerian memory often placed it among the first cities touched by kingship or divine order. The historical city was real, and its long occupation is not a fantasy. That much is firm ground. Yet the stories gathered around it move into deeper water, where archaeology and sacred imagination begin to mingle. Perhaps that is why Eridu feels less like a city and more like a beginning. You stand at the edge of a canal and watch the black surface tremble. Small boats made from reeds are pulled toward the bank. Nets hang from wooden frames. A child carries a basket of fish. Nearby, a potter turns wet clay into a vessel with steady hands. Nobody here thinks they are living at the dawn of civilization. People rarely do. They are simply hungry, tired, hopeful, and busy. The ordinary is powerful. Somewhere beyond the houses, a temple platform catches the moonlight. It is not enormous, yet it dominates the settlement because everything around it seems arranged in relation to it. Food moves toward it, offerings move toward it, labor moves toward it, words move toward it. The temple is not only a religious building, it is also a storehouse, workplace, archive, and center of authority. Modern scholarship often describes early Mesopotamian temples as institutions deeply involved in economic and social life. Records from the later period show rations, labor teams, offerings, and administrative oversight. That detail matters. It reminds you that the sacred was not floating above daily life. It was woven through bread, beer, wool, fields, boats, and bodies. The gods were not far away. They were in the schedule. There is a gentle irony in that. The great mystery of kingship may have begun beside someone counting fish. A cosmic order might have touched the earth through a ration bowl and a damp tablet. Ancient power often arrives wearing very practical sandals. You move closer to the temple mound. The bricks feel rough beneath your palm. They are made from the same earth that stains the riverbank. You sense hands pressing mud into shape, lifting, stacking, repairing. A sacred building in this world is not a single creation. It is an act repeated across generations. Fathers rebuild what grandmothers knew. Sons raise walls over the floors where unknown ancestors once stood. That's a kind of inheritance. Not blood alone, but habit. The hidden timeline begins here, not with shining crowns, but with return. A place is chosen, a shrine is built. It decays, it is rebuilt. The community changes, but the sacred point remains. Over time, the mound grows taller from devotion and debris. The city becomes a vertical memory. The people may die, but their pattern survives. Some researchers debate how early Mesopotamian urban life should be understood. Was it driven mainly by temple organization, environmental pressure, trade networks, irrigation, or social competition? Different scholars emphasize different forces, and the question remains open in serious study. The debate is useful because no single explanation fully contains the marsh, the fields, the shrine, and the human desire for order. You breathe in the night air. It carries damp herbs, smoke, and the faint sourness of fermenting grain. Somewhere, beer is being brewed in a large jar. Sumerians loved beer, and later texts show how common it became in rations and offerings. The detail is charming because it brings the ancient world very close. One can speak of divine descent and cosmic kingship, yet someone still had to strain the beer properly, otherwise even the gods might be disappointed. The thought softens the darkness. Still, Eridu is not merely charming, it has an undertone of unease. The marsh glitters under the moon like a skin stretched over deep water. Reeds whisper as if they are repeating names too old to translate. In later tradition, the city was connected with Enki, the god of wisdom, fresh work, craft, and hidden knowledge. His realm was imagined as a deep source beneath the earth, a mysterious watery abundance. That association matters for the forbidden idea of records. If memory begins at Eridu, it begins with water under the world. It begins with wisdom hidden below ordinary sight. It begins with a city built beside marshes, where land and water refuse to separate cleanly. The geography itself becomes a metaphor. Human life rises from mud, but the source is deeper than mud. Kingship appears on land, but its meaning comes from elsewhere. You look across the settlement, small fires blink between houses, dogs nose through refuse piles, a woman closes a reed door against insects, a man checks a tethered goat and mutters at its stubbornness. These people are not symbols to themselves, they are real. They sleep, sweat, argue, bargain, mourn, laugh, and carry water. Yet later tradition will place cities like this inside a sacred sequence, as if their lives belong to an immense design. This is where the idea of royal memory becomes more complicated. If kingship descends upon an already living world, then kings are not the beginning of humanity. They're an arrangement placed upon humanity. They arrive as structure. They divide time into reigns. They give the scribe something to list, but beneath that structure lies older labour, older ritual, older hunger, and older fear. Long before a royal name is pressed into clay, there is a mother drying fish. Long before a reign is counted, there is a boy learning to shape a brick. Long before a list declares that kingship has descended, there is a settlement turning mud into memory. A fringe idea sometimes attached to Eridu imagines it as a surviving echo of a lost civilization, perhaps even a remnant of knowledge brought from beyond the known world. Mainstream evidence does not require that conclusion. Pottery, architecture, and settlement patterns show long human development, not a sudden palace dropped from the stars. Yet the legend persists because Eridu occupies that strange emotional space where beginnings feel incomplete. The mind dislikes an empty origin. It fills the darkness. You sit near the water and listen. The temple behind you seems to watch without eyes. Above it, the stars tremble in the warm air. You realize that Sumerian memory did not begin with a neat line. It began with layers, with rebuilding, with sacred places growing slowly from human repetition. The kings would come later in grander form, wrapped in names and numbers, but the ground beneath them was already ancient. The Forbidden Library is not only a room of tablets, it is the whole landscape. Marsh, mound, canal, shrine, smoke, and moonlight preserve their own kind of record. They tell you that before the kings were written, the world had already learned to remember. For a moment, it feels as though the clay itself is watching you. Not with eyes, not with breath, but with the stubborn patience of something that has survived fire, flood, burial, and empire. A tablet lies in your hands, dense and silent, carrying marks that were never meant to entertain. They were meant to endure. The surface is uneven beneath your fingertips. One edge has snapped away, leaving a pale break like old bone. The signs march across the clay in narrow columns, disciplined and compact. Some wedges are deep, some are faint. The scribe pressed too hard in one place, too lightly in another. A human hand is still present in every imperfection. That is the strange intimacy of tablets. Stone monuments announce themselves. Gold objects glitter and demand attention. Clay tablets do something quieter. They wait in storerooms, libraries, collapsed houses, and temple debris. They sleep under dust until someone lifts them into daylight and discovers that an ancient accountant, priest, student, or royal scribe has been speaking the entire time. Records from Mesopotamia confirm that clay tablets preserved everything from trade accounts to myths. Universities such as Yale and Chicago have long studied these documents as a foundation for understanding early writing. Their work shows that the earliest records were often practical, yet the same material later carried poems, law collections, rituals, omens, and royal traditions. The humble medium became a vessel for enormous memory. You turn the tablet slightly, lamplight gathers in each wedge. There is something almost biological about the way these signs repeat. A mark appears, combines with another, changes meaning, travels into a new text, then reappears centuries later in a different city. Writing behaves like inheritance, not blood inheritance, of course, but cultural inheritance. A sign survives because scribes copy it. A name survives because institutions need it. A story survives because someone decides it should not be allowed to die. That decision is powerful. The Sumerian King List belongs to this world of copying and survival. It appears in multiple versions, not as one perfect master tablet falling from the sky, but as a tradition preserved by human hands. Some versions differ, some names shift, some reigns are damaged or incomplete. That makes the text more human, not less mysterious. It reminds you that ancient memory did not arrive as a single clean voice. It came through fragments. A broken tablet can still command a room. You imagine a scribe seated in a low chamber, knees folded, tablet balanced carefully. The smell of wet clay rises from the work surface. A reed stylus rests between his fingers. Outside, someone leads donkeys past a wall. A child coughs. A door creaks. The scribe does not look up. He copies a list of kings whose earliest reigns stretch far beyond ordinary life. Perhaps he believes every word. Perhaps he simply performs his duty. Perhaps, with the quiet skepticism of office workers everywhere, he thinks the numbers are someone else's problem. That little uncertainty matters. Ancient scribes were not machines. They trained for years. They learned signs, formats, calculations, hymns, and official phrases. They could preserve tradition while also reshaping it. In their hands, memory became organized. A scattered past entered columns. Power became sequence. Time became something that could be pressed into damp earth. The tablets outlived blood. Kings died. Families ended. Cities burned. Languages changed in the mouths of the living. Yet clay, once baked by accident or intention, could survive in ruin. The fragile body vanished, while the record remained. That reversal feels almost unsettling. Flesh is warm and urgent, but clay is the better witness. It does not remember kindly, it remembers exactly where the stylus pressed. You lean closer to the rows of signs. The names are not merely names, they are containers. Each name carries a city, a dynasty, a claim, a ritual world, and sometimes a trace of the divine. In royal traditions, a name can behave like a badge of descent. It can announce belonging. It can bind a ruler to a household, a god, or a remembered founder. It can turn a living man into the latest entry in a much older pattern. The tablet becomes a kind of coded skin. Not living skin, but symbolic on skin. Its marks transmit identity across time. Its rows suggest that rule is not random. One king follows another. One city receives kingship, loses it, and watches another city rise. The sequence has motion, almost like a pulse moving through the land. The pattern is not modern genetics, yet it resembles a cultural genome of authority. A quirky fringe tidbit claims that the King List may hide knowledge of engineered rulers or preserved bloodlines from beings outside ordinary humanity. Serious archaeology does not support such a claim in the literal sense. No excavated tablet contains laboratory language or biological instruction. Still, the fantasy grows from a real feature of the text. The list is obsessed with transmission. Who has the right to rule? Where does that right move? Why does it survive disaster? These are simple questions, but they opened all deep rooms. A farmer might care because his grain taxes depend on the ruler. A priest might care because offerings must follow official order. A royal household might care because legitimacy can protect a throne. A scribe might care because the text itself proves that the present king belongs inside a chain. The scholarly debate remains alive over how to classify such lists. Some historians view them as political tools that joined rival city traditions into one grand sequence. Others treat them as mythic history, combining real rulers with sacred memory. A more cautious interpretation suggests that the text is both archive and argument. It remembers, but it also persuades. That is often how power speaks. It does not merely say, "I rule." It says, "I was always meant to rule." You feel the weight of that claim in the tablet. The clay is small enough to hold, but the idea inside it is vast. Authority becomes older than any living witness. The current ruler can point backward into a fog of names and say that his crown belongs to a tradition descending through time. Whether the earliest entries are literal, symbolic, or theological, their purpose is not weak. They stretch the present into the ancient dark. In your ears, the echo changes into the scratch of stylus against clay. A teacher corrects a student's awkward signs. A young apprentice smooths a tablet and tries again. Nearby, older texts are stacked like loaves. The room smells of damp earth, wool, and the faint bitterness of oil smoke. The work is repetitive, patient, almost dull. Then you remember what is being copied. Impossible reigns, vanished cities, kings from a time no witness can explain. The dullness turns strange. This is the hidden magic of administration. It makes the unbelievable look official. Place a wild claim into neat columns, and suddenly it becomes calmer. Give it numbers, names, and order, and the mind leans closer. The list does not shout, it simply records. That quietness makes it more compelling. You can almost feel the scribes building a bridge between memory and control. A king's name is set beside a number. A city is placed in sequence. A catastrophe interrupts. Kingship moves again. Everything is arranged as though history has a design beneath its confusion. The tablets do not prove the design, but they preserve the desire for one. That desire is deeply human. To live is to be surrounded by endings. Bodies fail. Houses collapse. Fields flood. Children forget the voices of their grandparents. Writing pushes back against that disappearance. It says, here is the name, here is the reign, here is the order, here is the claim that something continues. You lower the tablet carefully. Its silence returns, but not completely. Once you have seen the marks, the clay no longer feels mute. It has told you that ancient records are not dead things. They are systems of survival. They keep kings alive long after blood has dried into dust. They preserve power by giving it form. They turn ancestry into memory, memory into sequence, and sequence into something very close to fate. The Forbidden Library feels larger now. It is not a place of hidden monsters or blazing secrets. It is a place where old human hands tried to write permanence onto earth. And perhaps, in those signs, the deepest record of Sumerian kings is not blood itself, but the ancient fear that without a list even kings vanish. The chamber grows colder as the oldest names begin to appear. You're no longer looking at kings who belong comfortably to city walls, tax records, and remembered battles. You're standing near the edge of a stranger horizon, where the Sumerian King List places rulers in a time before the Great Flood. Their names arrive like stones dropped into deep water. Alulim, Alalga, Enmenluana, Enmengalana, Dumuzi, Ensipaziana, Enmeduranki, Uchi Ubaratutu. The sounds feel distant even when spoken softly. They do not sit easily in the modern mouth. Each name seems half-preserved, half-dream, as though it has travelled through many scribal hands before reaching yours. The list says these rulers reigned for spans that overwhelm ordinary life. One rules for tens of thousands of years, another follows with another vast measure of time. The numbers are not most modest. They do not apologize. They stand in the clay as if eternity were a normal administrative category. You pause at that. A normal human life becomes almost invisible beside such figures. A village elder of 80 years would appear as a spark. A dynasty of 3 centuries would pass like a lamp flame in wind. These antediluvian kings inhabit a scale closer to geology than politics. Their time is not the time of aging knees, fading eyesight, and tired servants. It is the time of mountains. Modern historians generally treat these reign lengths as symbolic, theological, or literary rather than literal biography. Scholars at institutions such as Oxford and the University of Chicago have long examined the King List as a blend of tradition, ideology, and historical memory. The early names before the flood are usually read as mythic rulers, not as ordinary kings recorded by eyewitnesses. That is the solid path. Yet the path has a mist around it, Ned. Why preserve these reigns with such exactness? Why give impossible numbers in a list that later includes more plausible rulers? Why divide the record with a flood that changes the texture of time itself? You can hear the questions moving through the room like faint insects at the edge of lamplight. The clay does not answer quickly. In the old imagination, the flood is not merely bad weather. It is a rupture. It is the moment when one world ends and another begins. Before it, kings reign in spans too immense to hold. After it, reigns shrink toward human possibility. Time itself seems wounded, and history continues with a different body. This is where the idea of hidden lineage becomes unsettling. The kings before the flood may represent not people as we understand people, but a sacred model of rule. They stand as prototypes, first carriers of kingship, figures whose lives are measured in cosmic units because their function is cosmic. They are not simply rulers of cities, they are the first shapes authority takes on Earth. A soft sound passes through the library. Perhaps it is only dust shifting. Perhaps not. The ancient Near East was full of flood traditions, the Sumerian flood account, later Babylonian versions, and the famous tale of a survivor in the Epic of Gilgamesh all preserve the memory of a devastating divine decision. Research in respected journals has explored how large regional floods may have influenced such stories. Though scholars debate the relationship between actual environmental events and literary tradition, the evidence does not allow one simple conclusion. That uncertainty suits the darkness. You imagine the world before the flood as the scribes may have imagined it. Not prehistoric in the modern scientific sense, with numbered strata and careful climate models, but a sacred past where order is younger and more luminous. Cities stand beneath wide skies. Kings hold power for ages. The boundary between divine and human is thin. Messages pass from above. The earth itself seems nearer to its first command. The names become pillars. Alulim is often placed as the first ruler after kingship descends. He belongs to Eridu in some versions, and his reign is vast. Alalgar follows, also with immense years. Together they form something like a foundation. You sense that the list is not only naming men, it is staging an origin. It gives kingship a first house, a first throne, a first breath of legitimacy. The number matters because it creates distance. A reign of 30,000 years does not invite gossip. It removes the ruler from ordinary judgment. You cannot imagine his daily habits, his breakfast, his temper, or whether his sandals squeaked annoyingly across temple floors. The huge number purifies him into symbol. He becomes less a man and more a monument made of time. There is a quirky fringe tidbit that Enmeduranki, one of the antediluvian figures, has sometimes been compared by modern enthusiasts to mysterious sages or keepers of celestial knowledge. In some later Mesopotamian traditions, he is linked with divine secrets, divination, and heavenly instruction. Mainstream scholars treat such traditions as religious and literary developments, but the association gives him an eerie glow in popular imagination. A king who learns from heaven is never only a king, he becomes a conduit. The idea invites caution. It is easy to turn ancient texts into mirrors for modern fantasies. It is also easy to dismiss their strangeness too quickly, as if symbolic language were childish. A calmer reading keeps both hands open. The antediluvian kings do not prove a forgotten race of immortals. Yet they do show that Sumerian memory imagined authority as something older, higher, and larger than normal human life. You step closer to the tablet again. The wedge marks look small against the weight of what they claim. Each line compresses impossible duration into a few signs. A whole reign becomes a name and a number. Tens of thousands of years sit in a space smaller than your thumb. The effect is almost comic, and then it is not. Human beings have always tried to make the infinite manageable. We put forever to columns. Diamonds. That is our little trick. The scholarly debate over the numbers remains open in its finer details. Some researchers connect them with sexagesimal mathematics, the base 60 system used in Mesopotamia. Others see sacred exaggeration, political ordering, or mythic chronology. Still others emphasize how the list creates unity among competing cities' tradition. The numbers may serve several purposes at once, which is very inconvenient for anyone craving a tidy explanation. History enjoys doing that. It refuses to behave. The room seems to darken around the names before the flood. You feel the attraction of a hidden timeline, long before recorded history as we usually imagine it. These tablets place a sequence of rulers in an age no archive can fully illuminate. They are not fossils. They are not bones. They are narrative ancestors, preserved in clay because the scribes believed a beginning had to exist. Every society needs a beginning. Without one, power floats. The antediluvian kings anchor Sumerian kingship in sacred depth. They say that rule is not invented yesterday by a strong man with a spear. It belongs to an ancient order. It was lowered. It was held. It survived catastrophe. When the flood sweeps across the text, kingship does not disappear forever. It returns, altered and more human, like a survivor coughing mud from his lungs. The thought lingers. Perhaps the strangest part is not the impossible lifespans. Perhaps it is the confidence with which they are placed beside more earthly memories. Myth and history do not sit in separate locked rooms here. They share the same tablet. They lean against one another. The ancient scribe does not seem embarrassed by the mixture. Why should he be? For him, the past may not be divided into our clean categories. Sacred memory, political truth, and inherited tradition can all occupy the same line. A king may be historical in one sense, symbolic in another, and necessary in a third. The modern mind wants labels, the tablet offers sequence. You feel sleep gathering at the edges of the story, but the names continue to glow. They are too old to become familiar. They keep their distance. They remind you that the first rulers of Sumerian memory stand behind a veil of water, before the flood, before ordinary rains, before time has fully settled into human measure. And perhaps that is their purpose. They are not there to be solved like a puzzle. They are there to stretch the mind backward until history becomes almost dream. They stand in the Forbidden Library like guardians of an earlier order, whispering that kingship began in a time no living witness could remember, and that the oldest line of power may have been drawn across the world before humanity knew how fragile its memory would become. In your ears, the echo changes into the soft murmur of students reciting signs. The Forbidden Library becomes a schoolroom in Nippur, where young scribes bend over clay tablets with tense shoulders and dusty hands. Their teacher walks slowly between them, correcting a wedge here, a number there, a careless angle that might ruin a line of memory. The room smells of wet clay and reed fibre. There is also sweat, because learning eternity is apparently uncomfortable work. A boy rubs his wrist after pressing too hard with the stylus. Another tries to hide a flawed tablet beneath his knee. The teacher notices. Of course, teachers have been noticing these things since civilization was young. Nippur was one of the great sacred and intellectual centres of ancient Mesopotamia. Excavations by teams connected with the University of Pennsylvania uncovered thousands of tablets there, including school exercises, literary key texts, hymns, administrative records, and scholarly traditions. The city was closely associated with the god Enlil, whose temple gave Nippur a prestige that outlasted many political changes. That prestige matters. You sense it in the arrangement of the room. Scribes do not merely learn letters here. They learn how a world explains itself. They copy names of kings, names of gods, signs for grain, words for fields, phrases from hymns, and calculations that make trade possible. Their training joins the Shukrud and the ordinary until they can hardly be separated. A tablet dries beside the wall. Another is smoothed flat for reuse. Clay is forgiving while wet, then stubborn when dry. That simple fact shapes the rhythm of the school. A mistake can be erased early, but not forever, once hardened. The tablet begins its long sleep. The students know this, even if they pretend not to. They are not only practicing, they are preparing memory for survival. The scribal school becomes a quiet engine of inheritance. It does not pass blood from parent to child. It passes forms, signs, formulas, habits, and official ways of remembering. It teaches young hands how older hands arrange the past. In that sense, the school carries a cultural lineage as strict as any royal family. Every copied line is a small act of dissent. You watch one student copy a list of rulers. His stylus hesitates above a difficult name. The teacher speaks softly, perhaps too softly for comfort, and the boy corrects the sign. The king himself has been dead for ages, if he ever lived in the form the text claims. Yet his name still demands accuracy from a nervous child in Nippur. That is power of a peculiar kind. The dead still assign homework. A mainstream fact from the study of Mesopotamian education is that scribal training involved repeated copying. Lexical lists, model contracts, proverbs, and literary passages helped students learn the complex writing system. Scholars from Yale and Chicago have emphasized how these school tablets reveal not only language instruction, but also the values and worldview of educated urban society. The King List belongs naturally among such learned traditions. It is not a casual tale told by a shepherd beside a fire. It is a structured artifact of scribal culture. Its power depends on arrangement. Cities appear in sequence, kings are counted, reigns are measured, catastrophe is inserted at the proper place. The world becomes intelligible because the scribe makes it orderly, and order is seductive. You lean against a mud brick wall and listen to the scratching of styluses. Each sound is small, but together they resemble rain on a dry roof. The students are making signs, but they're also making continuity. A phrase survives because it is copied. A divine title survives because it is memorized. A king survives because his name remains in the curriculum of power. There is an open scholarly debate about how much independence these scribes had when transmitting older traditions. Some researchers see them mainly as preservers of inherited material. Others stress that copying was also creative, since selection, spelling, sequence, and emphasis could reshape memory. The careful middle path suggests that scribes preserved the past by continually remaking it. That idea changes the room. The students are not passive vessels. They are young architects of the ancient record. A tired boy copying a royal name may seem insignificant, but his hand helps decide what later ages can recover. If he copies one version and not another, one chain of kings travels forward while another fades. Memory can depend on a wrist cramp. This is mildly alarming. It is also very human. The Forbidden Library is not only protected by walls, it is protected by training. Only those who know the signs can enter its deeper chambers. The ordinary farmer may hear royal names in festival songs, but the scribe sees their official arrangement. He understands how kingship moves from city to city. He knows which formulas make a claim sound ancient. He knows how long memory must be stretched before authority feels inevitable. That is where royal descent becomes almost biological in its cultural form. A body inherits features through birth. A kingdom inherits legitimacy through repetition. The scribal school repeats the same structures until they feel natural. A name placed in a line becomes part of a living system. The list begins to act like a social body with veins of clay and a heartbeat of recitation. Your fingers brush a shelf filled with practice tablets. Some contain clumsy signs. Others are elegant, narrow, and controlled. A student once struggled here, perhaps bored almost to despair by lists of words. Yet those exercises created the skill needed to preserve myths, hymns, royal inscriptions, and legal documents. The world's first great archives did not emerge from inspiration alone. They emerged from practice. A quirky fringe tidbit claims that ancient scribal schools may have guarded secret knowledge reserved for elites, including hidden sciences of kingship and destiny. The dramatic version imagines candlelit initiates whispering forbidden truths behind locked doors. The calmer evidence points to specialized education, temple scholarship, omen texts, mathematics, and ritual knowledge. Still, to an outsider, literacy itself may have looked like a secret power, and perhaps it was. To read was to enter a second world. A scribe could summon absent goods, dead kings, distant cities, and divine instructions through marks on clay. He could make a command travel beyond a speaking voice. He could preserve a ruler after burial. He could place a name inside the machinery of time. You can feel why writing and authority grew close. A king needs scribes because power must be counted, announced, justified, and remembered. A temple needs scribes because offerings, labour, and ritual schedules cannot depend only on memory. A city needs scribes because complexity has a terrible appetite for records. Without them, order frays quietly, and everyone pretends not to notice until the grain is missing. The schoolroom grows dim as evening settles over Nippur. The students stack their tablets. The teacher inspects a final exercise. Outside, donkeys bray, sandals scrape, and a potter curses at a cracked jar. Life remains wonderfully undignified around the machinery of civilization. Yet inside, something solemn continues. The scribes of Nippur are shaping the memory of kings into a learned form. They are turning scattered traditions into lists that can travel. They are placing sacred authority into a sequence that later generations will read with awe, doubt, amusement, and unease. Their school is a quiet workshop where royal time is disciplined into columns. You look at the last tablet on the payo. It is damp, unfinished, and vulnerable. A careless hand could smear it, a fall could break it, a fire could harden it forever. That is the strange bargain of clay. It can lose everything in a breath, or preserve a sentence for thousands of years. The young scribe presses one final sign. The king's name settles into the surface. In that small act, the forbidden library expands. It is no longer only a place where ancient kings are stored. It is the living system that taught human hands how to store them. It is discipline, repetition, memory, and the slow transformation of power into text. Here in Nippur, royal descent becomes something more durable than blood, because blood dies quietly, while a copied name can keep walking through the dark. The words arrive softly, yet they change the whole room. Kingship was lowered from heaven. The phrase does not crash like thunder. It settles like dust on a temple floor, quiet and absolute, as though the ancient scribes were not making an argument at all. They were stating the shape of reality. You hear it in the dark. Kingship was lowered, not invented, not negotiated, not seized first by a clever man with sharp elbows and a suspiciously loyal cousin. Lowered, given from above, sent downward into the human plane, where mud brick walls, canals, shrines, and worried farmers waited beneath the heat. The phrase is one of the most famous ideas connected with the Sumerian King List. Scholars at major research centres have long treated it as a key to Mesopotamian political thought. The line presents kingship as a divine institution, something that enters human life from a higher order. It does not begin as a town meeting, it descends as a sacred structure. That matters deeply. You stand beneath an open sky now, outside the imagined archive, watching a city breathe in the early morning. The horizon glows pale gold. Smoke rises from cooking fires. A temple platform lifts above the roofs, its stairs catching the first light. Far below, people already move through their duties. Water jars are carried, animals complain, someone drops a basket and mutters bid that history politely refuses to preserve. The city wakes under heaven. In this world, heaven is not a decorative idea. It is part of the architecture of power. The king rules on earth, but his office points upward. His commands may concern canals, the fields, labour, and war. Yet his authority is clothed in sacred descent. The people do not only obey a man, they obey a cosmic arrangement made visible through a man. That is the dangerous elegance of the phrase. It makes authority feel older than an argument. A modern reader may ask whether ancient citizens truly believed this. The answer is not simple. Belief is rarely a single solid object. Some may have accepted divine kingship with reverence. Some may have accepted it because the temple fed them. Some may have accepted it because refusing powerful men with weapons has never been a popular health plan. Human motives are always layered. The scribes knew the value of layers. By saying kingship came from heaven, they gave political rule a sacred origin. They did not need to explain every tax, every conscription, every command, or every official with a tablet and a frown. The structure itself was blessed. The king could fail, cities could fall, dynasties could collapse. But kingship as an institution remained above ordinary failure. It could move. That is another strange part of the list. Kingship does not stay forever in one city. It descends, rests, shifts, and appears elsewhere. It is almost treated like a divine charge travelling through the landscape. Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sippar, Shurupak, Kish, Uruk, and other cities become stations in a sacred sequence. Authority has geography, but it is not trapped by geography. You imagine it like a lamp carried through darkness. One city glows, then another. The hidden timeline becomes clearer here. The ancient record is not only interested in who ruled, it is interested in how rule itself enters and moves through human society. The kings are individual names, but kingship is the deeper current. Names rise and fall upon it like reeds off boom. On floodwater, the current remains. A council decree from later Mesopotamian cities could prove that human decision-making certainly existed. Assemblies, elders, officials, and legal procedures were not absent from the ancient world, yet royal ideology often placed ultimate authority beyond human debate. This tension creates a fascinating landscape. Practical politics happened on the ground, while sacred explanation hovered above it. The result is very Mesopotamian. It is realistic and cosmic at once. You walk toward the temple stairs. The stone is not polished marble, but sun-baked brick and packed earth. The surface is warm under your hand. Incense drifts from an inner room, mixed with wool, oil, and the faint metallic smell of tools. Somewhere inside, offerings are being prepared. The temple is busy, not dreamy, and divinity here has inventory. Still, every practical act rests inside a sacred story. Grain enters the storehouse because fields belong to a divine order. Workers receive rations because labour supports the temple and city. The king stands between gods and humans because his role explains why the system holds together. Kingship lowered from heaven becomes the invisible roof of daily life. There is a quirky fringe tidbit attached to this phrase. Some modern enthusiasts read it as a literal memory of rulers arriving from the sky, perhaps beings with advanced knowledge who established civilization. The idea is dramatic, and admittedly it makes for excellent late-night whispering. Mainstream history reads the phrase differently, as religious language about divine legitimacy, yet the literal image remains powerful because the wording is so spatial. Something above comes down. Language leaves shadows. Even when interpreted carefully, the phrase still feels immense. It suggests that humans did not simply wake one morning and decide authority would be useful. The ancient imagination places the origin outside humanity. Kingship is a gift, burden, command, or intervention. It is something received, not merely designed. That difference changes humanity's role. If kingship is lowered, then humans are not the authors of the system. They are participants inside it. The king receives the office. The city hosts it. The people serve under it. The scribes record its movement. Human beings become the ground upon which a heavenly structure is tested. Perhaps that is why the idea feels unsettling. It makes civilization sound less like achievement and more like assignment. You do not only build canals because you are clever. You build because order has been placed upon you. You do not only obey because the king is strong. You obey because the office claims a source beyond strength. The mud brick city becomes a stage for something descending through human labour. The open scholarly debate concerns how literally ancient audiences understood such divine descent. Some historians emphasise royal propaganda and elite ideology. Others highlight sincere religious worldview, where gods and institutions were inseparable. Another careful reading sees the phrase as both political and theological, a tool that shaped belief while reflecting belief. Ancient power rarely fits into one modern drawer. The sky above the city brightens. Birds move over the canal. You notice how the first light touches everything equally. It glints on the temple walls, storage jars, wet reeds, animal horns, and the tired face of a woman carrying bread. Heaven may lower kingship, but earth must carry it. The divine phrase depends on human backs. Without workers, scribes, builders, brewers, herders, boatmen, and mothers waking children before dawn, kingship would remain an empty word floating above mud. This is the quiet truth beneath the grand claim. Heaven lowers authority. Humans make it function. You can almost hear the system assembling itself. The king needs the temple to sanctify him. The temple needs the king to defend and endow it. The scribes need both to give their records importance. The people need order, water, food, and some hope that the whole arrangement is not merely one large ancient spreadsheet with sandals. A faint smile passes through the darkness. Then the solemnity returns. Because once kingship is imagined as heavenly, rebellion becomes more than politics, succession becomes more than inheritance, a royal line becomes more than family, it becomes the vessel of a descending force. That is where the idea of symbolic genetic memory deepens. The code is not in blood alone, it is in the office, the ritual, the phrase, the repeated claim that authority has come from above and must be carried below. The city below the temple continues its mourning. A potter turns clay, a scribe dries a tablet, a priest lifts a bowl, a guard watches the gate. None of them need to explain the system in full, they live inside it. The phrase has already done its work. It has made kingship feel like part of the sky's own order, as natural as sunrise, as heavy as heat, as difficult to question as the need for water. You look upward. There is no throne visible in the whole blue. There is only open air, bright and empty. Yet the ancient words remain in your mind, calm and commanding. Kingship was lowered from heaven. The line does not prove what heaven was, or what truly descended, or whether the first kings were remembered rulers, sacred symbols, or something stranger. It simply opens a vertical path in history. At the top is mystery. At the bottom is clay, clay. And between them stands humanity, holding a crown it may never fully understand. The scent changes as you pass into the temple dark. Outside, the city is heat, clay, animals, and shouted labour. Inside, the air is cooler and thicker, carrying oil smoke, stored grain, woven wool, and a trace of incense that clings to the throat. Your eyes adjust slowly and shapes emerge in layers. First pillars, then jars, then the faint outline of a doorway leading deeper within. This is where bloodlines become quiet. Quiet. Not all royal descent announces itself from a throne. Some of it moves through sealed rooms, household arrangements, marriage contracts, priestly offices, and the careful placement of daughters. The loud story of kings is often written in public. The quieter story of dynastic survival is often managed behind walls, where families understand that power must be continued, not merely displayed. You hear sandals on packed earth. A priestess crosses the chamber with measured steps. Her robe brushes against her ankles. A servant follows carrying a small vessel. Nearby, a scribe sits beside a low table, recording offerings and names. None of this appears dramatic at first. It is administration, a ritual, habit, yet beneath the routine lies a hidden machinery of legitimacy. Ancient Mesopotamian temples were not separate from political life. Records studied by major universities show that temples managed wealth, labour, land, offerings, and personnel. Royal families often interacted with temple institutions through gifts, appointments, and ritual roles. In some periods, royal daughters held powerful priestly offices, linking dynasty and deity through carefully maintained status. That link is important. A king may claim authority by conquest, but conquest alone is restless. It needs ceremony to settle down. It needs priests to bless it, scribes to record it, and households to bind it into the future. A victory can take a city in one day, a marriage alliance can hold it for a generation, much less noisy, usually more effective. You stand near a storage alcove where sealed jars line the wall. Their clay stoppers bear impressions from cylinder seals. Tiny scenes are pressed into them. Figures approaching gods, animals in procession, symbols of office and identity. A seal is a miniature declaration. It says who authorized the goods, who belonged to which institution, and which hand had the right to close the container. The mark stands in for the person. That idea feels close to the theme of hidden records. A seal impression is not blood, yet it carries identity. It can move across storerooms and transactions. It proves connection. It binds property, office, a name into a visible sign. The royal household works in much the same way. Its members are signs within a system, each one placed where continuity requires them. Queens matter here. Priestesses matter here. Daughters matter here. The King List often gives pride of place to male rulers, as many ancient records do, yet dynastic reality was never that simple. Women could carry alliances, priestly authority, property ties, and sacred legitimacy. A royal daughter installed in a temple could become a living bridge between palace and god. A queen could bring a powerful family into the royal circle. A mother could shape the claim of a future ruler through her origin and status. The hidden line does not always wear a crown. You notice a woven curtain moving gently in a faint draught. Beyond it, voices murmur in low tones. Perhaps officials are discussing offerings. Perhaps a household matter is being arranged. Perhaps a marriage is being negotiated with the solemn patience of people who know that affection is pleasant, but land and legitimacy are terribly persuasive. A little tone. Talk to me louder. Ancient romance often had paperwork. Still more. The emotional weight is real. In societies where royal authority depended on recognized descent, a marriage could redirect power. A child born from the right union could become more than a child. That child could become proof. A tiny human being, probably crying at inconvenient hours, might carry the future of a dynasty in the eyes of the court. The Temple Dark keeps such truths close. An open, scholarly debate concerns how far temple offices shaped dynastic politics in different Sumerian periods. Some historians emphasize religious devotion and civic order. Others focus on economic power and political strategy. A balanced view suggests that these elements often work together, because sacred service, household ambition, and institutional wealth were not neatly separated. You move toward a chamber where tablets are stored in baskets, some record offerings, some list workers, some preserved names attached to temple duties. These are not glamorous documents. They do not sing like epic poetry, yet they may reveal the real skeleton of power more clearly than a heroic inscription. Bread, oil, wool, labour, and names show who belonged inside the system. The records breathe softly. Every name has a place. The idea of forbidden ancestry becomes less spectacular and more intimate here. Not shining beings from the stars, not immortal kings striding through flood mist, but families arranging survival through ritual channels. This is not less mysterious. It may be more so. A civilization can hide its deepest codes in ordinary forms, in dowries, appointments, temple rations, and the repeated title beside a woman's name. A quirky fringe tidbit claims that certain priestly lineages may have guarded secret blood knowledge linked to divine descent. There is no firm archaeological proof for a literal hidden genetic archive, yet priestly families did preserve specialized knowledge, ritual status, and inherited roles over long periods to outsiders. That continuity could easily feel like a secret blood current running beneath the public city. You can understand the temptation. A temple is built to suggest depth. Its inner rooms restrict access. Its rituals require training. Its objects are handled by particular people. Its songs are not everyday speech. When royal families attach themselves to such places, their descent gains a sacred shadow. The line no longer appears merely biological, it appears consecrated. The cold floor presses through your souls. Somewhere, a bowl is set down with a soft knock. The sound travels through the chamber and fades among the jars. You feel how slowly power moves in this place. Not like battle, not like a shout in the square. Temple power moves through repetition. Morning offerings, evening lamps, monthly rites, annual festivals, names copied, goods sealed, children born into remembered houses. That slow movement is difficult to destroy. A city can be conquered, yet the conqueror may still need its temple. A dynasty can fail, yet the sacred office may remain. A royal house can vanish, but its marriages and temple ties may echo through later claims. Blood alone is fragile. Ritual gives blood a costume receptorum, a stain and an audience. You glance at the priestess again. Her face is calm, but not empty. She knows the weight of office, as she carries no sword. Yet her presence organizes the room. People step aside, the scribe watches carefully, servants lower their voices. Her authority is not the same as a king's authority, but it touches the same hidden structure. She stands where family, deity, property, and memory meet. This is how lineage becomes layered. A king's son may inherit a throne, a king's daughter may stabilize a temple bond, a queen may join rival houses, a priest may certify the sacred meaning of a birth, a scribe may preserve the official version. None of these acts alone creates the entire system. Together they weave it tightly enough to outlast any one body. You sense the forbidden library widening again. Its shelves are no longer filled only with royal lists. They hold contracts, seals, offerings, hymns, and household records. The library includes everything that makes a dynasty believable. The official king list may present succession as a grand line moving through cities, but temple documents reveal the smaller threads that help such lines endure. There is something almost tender in that. Not gentle, exactly, dorosiel. Ancient power was rarely gentle, but tender in the sense of touch. A hand presses a seal, a mother holds a newborn, a priestess lifts a bowl, a scribe dries a tablet near the lamp, a marriage bracelet closes around a wrist. These small actions carry royal memory into the future, quietly and repeatedly. The temple dark asks you to look beyond the crowned figure. It asks you to notice the people who carry legitimacy in less visible ways. The hidden record of Sumerian kings is not only a list of male names, it is a web of bodies, offices, rituals, and carefully guarded relationships. It is blood made public through ceremony, and ceremony made durable through clay. At the chamber's centre, the lamp flame bends. For a moment, the shelves seem to draw closer. The old records do not reveal a single secret bloodline, neatly locked away. They reveal something more unsettling, because it is more believable. Power survives by entering every room where memory is managed. It enters the temple, the household, the marriage bed, the rationalist, the seal, and the child whose name has not yet been written. And in that cool, fragrant darkness, you understand that dynasties do not continue by blood alone. They continue because a whole civilization agrees, again and again, to recognize which blood matters. The first thing you notice is scale. Not height alone, not size in the simple sense, but the way ancient art teaches the eye to obey. On a carved seal, one figure stands taller than the others. On a stone relief, one body dominates the scene. On a temple wall, a ruler may appear larger than servants, enemies, animals, and sometimes even the crowded confusion of war. Power grows in pictures. You stand in a dim chamber where objects rest on low tables. Cylinder seals lie beside fragments of plaques. A broken statue head gazes upward with wide, hollow eyes. The lamp throws shadows across the surfaces, enlarging every figure you see, until the walls seem crowded with silent giants. Their bodies are not moving, yet they press into the room. Ancient Mesopotamian art often used hierarchy of scale, making important figures appear larger than less important ones. Museums and university collections preserve many examples of this visual language, where size communicates status rather than biology. A king is not always shown large because he is physically enormous. He is shown large because the world around him is meant to bend toward his authority. That is the careful explanation. Still, thus, the imagination does not always stay careful. When you see a towering figure holding lions, standing above captives, or facing gods, the old question stirs again. Why did ancient artists so often speak through exaggerated bodies? Why does power become height, strength, and unnatural stillness? Why do rulers appear less like ordinary men and more like beings built from command? The clay room grows quiet. You move closer to a seal impression. The scene is tiny, yet it contains an entire world. A hero grapples with animals. A god sits before a worshipper. Attendants stand in rigid profile. The bodies are formal, repeated, almost dreamlike. Nothing feels casual. Even violence becomes pattern. Even muscles become signs. In Sumer and nearby cultures, figures later called heroes or divine beings sometimes appear in art with unusual strength, horned crowns, or commanding postures. The horned crown, in particular, became a major marker of divinity in Mesopotamian imagery. It does not prove the figure was physically monstrous. It marks the figure as belonging to a sacred category. The category matters more than the body. Yet there is an unsettling fringe tidbit that will not leave the edges of the story. Some modern writers have claimed that Mesopotamian images of large rulers or powerful beings preserve memories of giants, hybrid bloodlines, or non-human overlords. The claim is far outside mainstream archaeology. Scholars generally interpret the images through religion, royal propaganda, and artistic convention. Still, the idea clings to the shadows because the ancient visual world is deliberately larger than life. And larger than life has consequences. You look at a carved figure whose eyes are wide and round. The gaze is not naturalistic, it is devotional. Votive statues from ancient Mesopotamia often show worshippers with enlarged eyes, possibly expressing eternal attentiveness before the divine. They are not portraits in the modern sense. They are bodies transformed into prayer. The effect is eerie. They watch forever. In the low light, the statues seem less like offerings and more like witnesses. Their clasped hands rest against their chests. Their feet are joined. Their faces hold a calm too intense to be some sleep. They were made to stand in sacred space when their human donors could not. A person could leave a stone substitute before the yid, a permanent body of devotion. This is another kind of double existence. The living body leaves. The stone body remains. When kings enter this world of images, they become more than flesh. Their bodies can be enlarged, idealized, sharpened, and made symbolic. The royal form becomes a text. Muscles say strength, height says command, the steady gaze says divine approval. A beard, robe, mate, or crown can turn the king into a readable system. The hidden record is not only written in tablets, it is carved into posture. You walk among the objects and feel the strange calm of them. A battle scene does not shout. A divine audience does not explain itself. The ancient artist trusts the viewer to understand rank, gesture, and scale. One figure holds the center, others approach, serve, fall, or plead. The visual order becomes political order. A mainstream historical fact appears in that arrangement. Ancient Mesopotamian rulers used art and inscriptions to present themselves as chosen, victorious, pious, and protective. Scholars at Harvard, Yale, and other major institutions have studied how royal images shaped public memory. These images were not mere decoration. They taught people how to see authority, and seeing is never innocent. If a ruler is shown larger again and again, the mind begins to feel his largeness even when he walks as an ordinary man. If gods appear enthroned above worshippers, hierarchy becomes familiar. If enemies are shown small, bent, or tangled, defeat becomes visual truth. Art trends belief without needing to argue. That may be the oldest magic of images. They persuade while pretending to show. A scholarly debate continues around how ordinary people encountered and understood royal art. Some researchers emphasize elite contexts, where images were seen by limited audiences in temples or palaces. Others suggest that seals, monuments, and public objects spread visual messages more widely. The question is difficult because ancient viewers left few direct reflections on what they felt while looking. You can only stand where they stood. You can only watch the figures loom. In the Forbidden Library, the giants are not necessarily creatures of flesh. They are giants of representation. They are rulers expanded by art until they occupy more than human space. They are gods marked by crowns and scale. They are heroes whose bodies carry the burden of myth. Their greatness is measured in pose, placement, and sense. Still, the old stories make room for beings who exceed the normal human world. Mesopotamian literature contains divine assemblies, semi-divine heroes, monstrous guardians, cosmic creatures, and sages from watery depths. These are not simple reports of zoology. They are mythic beings that explain fear, wisdom, kingship, wilderness, and the unknown. The boundary bends. That bending matters for humanity's role. Human beings in these images often appear smaller, serving, approaching, or receiving command. They stand between animals and gods, between labour and ritual, and between fear and obedience. The royal body, enlarged and perfected, becomes the human form pushed toward the divine. It is familiar enough to recognise, strange enough to obey. You can almost sense why people later imagined giants. A king who controls canals, armies, grain, temples, scribes, and sacred festivals already feels larger than normal life. Art simply gives that social largeness a body. The ruler becomes what his power feels like to those beneath him. Not taller in bone, perhaps, but taller in consequence. That's no small thing. A person can be gigantic without being physically large. Ask anyone who has waited outside an official door while a clerk decides their fate. Ancient civilization did not invent that feeling, but it gave it beautiful seals and terrifying crowns. The lamp flickers over another object. A figure grasps two animals by the necks, holding them apart with impossible calm. The scene may symbolize mastery over wild nature. It may invoke heroic strength or divine protection. It may belong to a long visual tradition whose meanings shifted over time. The exact reading is debated, but the feeling is immediate. Order grips chaos. The hands do not tremble. You begin to see how the strange seed of giants grows from many roots. Exaggerated royal scale, divine crowns, heroic figures, mythic beings, sacred statues with unnatural eyes, stories of rulers whose reigns stretch beyond ordinary life. None of these alone proves a race of giants. Together, they create an atmosphere where power appears physically transformed. That atmosphere is the hidden archive. It preserves how ancient people felt authority before they explained it. They saw kings as larger. They carved gods as otherworldly. They imagined heroes standing at thresholds where human strength failed. Their visual world admitted that some beings were not merely people with better furniture. They belonged to another category. You sit beside the table and let the silence settle. The objects do not ask you to believe in literal giants. They ask something subtler. They ask whether human societies have always needed enlarged figures to explain enlarged power. They ask why a ruler must be made taller in art, longer lived in lists, divinely chosen in language. Perhaps the giant is a social invention. Perhaps the giant is a memory. Perhaps it's both. And that's why it refuses to leave. The room dims around the figures. Their outlines blur, then sharpen again as the lamp recovers. You feel the old unease, gentle but persistent. The Sumerian kings may not have been giants in the body, yet the records made them giants in time. The images made rulers giants in space. The rituals made them giants in meaning. And somewhere in that combination, the ordinary human body became too small to carry the story alone. Rain begins without warning in the old imagination. It does not fall as a pleasant blessing on tired fields. It arrives as a boundary, a judgment, a sheet of water drawn across memory. You hear it first on reed roofs, then in courtyards, then on the river itself, where each drop vanishes into a surface already beginning to rise. The air smells of wet clay. The sky has lost its edges. In the Sumerian King List, the flood stands like a dark line cut through the record. For it, reigns stretch into impossible vastness. After it, kingship returns, but the scale begins to change. The text does not linger with the emotional detail a modern storyteller might expect. It simply lets the flood interrupt the world, and then the sequence continues. That simplicity feels almost colder than drama. A mainstream historical fact rests beneath this atmosphere. Ancient Mesopotamian literature preserves several flood traditions, including Sumerian and Akkadian accounts involving a chosen survivor, divine warning, Olhong, a boat, and the preservation of life. Scholars at institutions such as Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have examined these stories as part of a broad ancient Near Eastern tradition, shaped by both environment and theology. The land itself makes such stories understandable. Southern Mesopotamia lived with water as both gift and threat. Rivers fed fields, canals, reed beds, fish, boats, and trade. Yet rivers also shifted, flooded, and destroyed. A farmer could bless water in the morning and fear it by evening. Civilization there depended on controlling a force that never truly submitted. You stand at the edge of a rising canal. Mud sucks at your feet. Reeds bend under the weight of rain. A dog barks and then stops. People run through the dimness carrying bundles, grain sacks, children, tools, and sacred objects wrapped in cloth. The city, so certain a moment ago, begins to feel temporary. Walls darken. Bricks soften. Water presses into thresholds. Everything returns to mud. There is no need for loud terror. The slow version is worse. A line of water creeps across a floor where someone once slept. A storage jar tips and rolls. A tablet dissolves because it was never fired. Names vanish into brown slurry. A family shrine collapses softly, not like a heroic ruin, but like wet bread. The flood is a genetic cut only in metaphor. Yet it is a powerful one. It divides the imagined ancestry of kings into two conditions. Before the flood, rulers belonged to a vast and almost inhuman time. After the flood, kingship has survived, but something has been reduced. The line continues while the old scale is broken. That is how disasters often work. They do not erase everything. They change what survival means. A fringe tidbit often attached to flood traditions claims that the deluge records the deliberate reset of humanity by divine or celestial powers, perhaps even the cleansing of an earlier bloodline. Mainstream scholarship does not require such a literal hidden program. The stories are usually read as mythic reflections on divine decision, human vulnerability, and remembered catastrophe. Yet the idea of a reset lingers because the text itself places a rupture at the heart of royal time. The list could have flowed continuously. It does not. It stops, drowns, and begins again. You imagine a scribe copying that interruption centuries later. His stylus moves through ancient names and enormous reigns, then reaches the flood. Perhaps he pauses, perhaps he does not. The phrase is familiar to him, part of the tradition. Yet to you, standing inside the stew, it feels like a scar in clay. A scar does not explain itself. It only shows where something happened. The open scholarly debate concerns how flood memory developed in Mesopotamia. Some researchers connect the stories with local river floods or major regional inundations. Others emphasize literary borrowing, theological reflection, and the symbolic need to separate primeval time from historical time. A cautious view allows several influences at once, because memory can turn weather, trauma, ritual, and ideology into one enduring story. Outside, the rain thickens. You hear the dull knock of floating debris against a wall. A goat bleats from somewhere unseen. People call names into the water, and the water gives back only movement. The temple platform rises above the lower streets, but even sacred height feels less secure beneath such a sky. Priests lift baskets of tablets toward an upper room. A servant slips and curses under his breath. Even Apocalypse has logistics. That small thought does not break the mood. It makes it more human. Every cosmic disaster, once it reaches the ground, becomes a problem of wet sandals, frightened animals, missing children, and food that must stay dry. Ancient people did not experience myth in gold letters. They experienced it in bodies. The King List treats the flood as the end of an era of rulers. It suggests that kingship, though divine in origin, can be displaced by catastrophe. This is strange. If kingship comes from above, why does water sweep across its earthly houses? Perhaps because kingship is not the same as any one king. The office survives what bodies cannot. The body is fragile. The institution returns. After the flood, kingship is said to descend again. That return matters as much as the destruction. It means the sacred structure does not die with the old world. Authority reappears, cleansed, transferred or reissued. Humanity does not escape rule. It receives it again, now in a world marked by loss. You look at the water and think of inheritance. A family line can be broken by plague, war, disaster, or political collapse. A royal house can end in one night. Yet another family can claim continuity by ritual, marriage, conquest, or memory. In the King List, the flood cuts through the old rulers, but the concept of kingship passes across the water like a sealed jar that somehow floats. What does that jar contain? Names, perhaps. Authority, perhaps. A story someone needs to survive. This is where the metaphor of ancient deoxyribonucleic acid grows darker. In modern terms, genetic inheritance depends on living bodies. In the Sumerian record, royal inheritance depends on divine favour, scribal sequence, and cultural memory. The flood kills bodies, but the code of kingship is rewritten onto new clay. The line does not continue biologically in any proven sense. It continues symbolically, and symbols can be stubborn. You walk through a flooded street in imagination. Water covers the lower bricks. A wooden door floats past, turning slowly. Oil from a broken jar spreads in a thin, dark skin across the surface. The smell is sharp and bitter. Somewhere above, lightning flickers behind clouds, briefly revealing the temple as a black shape against a silver sky. The world feels unfinished. Perhaps this is what the flood means still inside royal memory. It is the end of the first draft of order. The old kings, and too vast to be ordinary, belong to a world that cannot remain. Their immense reigns become sealed behind water. Afterward, kingship must take root in a more limited age, where rulers die sooner, cities compete, and human history becomes heavier with evidence. The flood makes kings human. Again, not fully, not immediately, but gradually, it pulls the timeline closer to the ground. It changes the texture of the list from cosmic distance toward a political memory. That does not make the later record simple or perfectly historical. It only means the atmosphere shifts. The rulers after the flood stand nearer to archaeology, nearer to rivalry, nearer to the mortal world of walls, graves, and broken pottery. Rain begins to soften. The floodwater remains. You stand in the hush after the greatest noise has passed. There is no triumph here, only soaked earth, scattered reeds, and a silence filled with survivors. A child cries from an upper room. Someone calls for a missing brother. A priest checks whether the tablets are still dry. A tired woman wrings water from her robe and looks at the sky with an expression older than prayer. The royal line has been cut, yet not ended. That is the unsettling beauty of the record. The flood does not simply destroy the ancient kings. It turns them into a separate species of memory. They become the rulers of a drowned era, inaccessible except through lists and myth. Their blood, if they had blood like yours, is beyond recovery. Their authority, however, is not beyond recovery. It is preserved by the very text that marks their disappearance. Water erases, clay remembers, and perhaps, in that contradiction, the Forbidden Library reveals why the flood stands at the centre of the Sumerian royal imagination. It is not only a catastrophe, it is a division between kinds of time, kinds of rulers, and kinds of human inheritance. On one side are kings whose reigns belong to the horizon of dream. On the other side are rulers stepping slowly toward history. Between them lies water, dark and patient, carrying away the first world while leaving just enough memory for the next one to wonder what was lost. The water withdraws from the story, and the land appears changed. Mud lies thick over courtyards and streets, smooth in some places, torn in others. Broken reeds cling to walls. Fish flash briefly in the shallow pools where children once played. The air smelled of damp brick, rotting plants, as the first smoke of cooking fires returning to life. You stand near Kish. The name feels firmer beneath your thoughts. It does not belong to a dream age beyond measure. It belongs to a world nearer to human history, where rulers still carry mythic weight. Yet archaeology begins to offer more recognizable ground. The city rises in southern Mesopotamia. Near old river branches and routes that link many settlements. It is not merely a place on a list, it is a political possibility. In the Sumerian King List, kingship after the flood is said to descend to Kish. That claim gave Kish immense symbolic importance in later Mesopotamian memory. Archaeological work at the site revealed major occupation layers, graves, pottery, buildings, and evidence of urban life. Scholars connected with Oxford, Chicago, and other research centres have discussed Kish as a key early centre in the development of Mesopotamian political culture. The phrase first human crown is not literal, of course. Nothing about early kingship is that tidy, yet Kish carries the feeling of a restart. After the enormous rains and drowned horizons, authority settles into a city whose rulers begin to sound closer to earth. Their reigns may still be long by ordinary standards, but the atmosphere has shifted. You no longer feel only cosmic distance. You feel rivalry, walls, armies, households, grain, ambition, and paperwork. Always paperwork. Civilization does adore its tablets. You walk along a street that has dried enough to bear weight. Mud brick walls rise on either side. Their surfaces are patched, scarred, and practical. A donkey shakes its ears beside a doorway. A woman pours cloudy water into a jar and watches the sediment settle. Men repair a roof with reeds and fresh clay. Life does not resume grandly. It resumes because someone needs breakfast. That is how history returns. Not with trumpets. With chores, Kish becomes important because it suggests a stage where kingship grows more recognizably political. The ruler is no longer only a figure placed in primeval distance. He must manage land, loyalty, labor, defense, and relations with other cities. His crown, whether real, symbolic, or imagined by later scribes, rests on human problems. The first dynasty of Kish in the King List contains many names, some obscure and some wrapped in legend. The text presents them in a sequence that claims authority for the city after the flood. One name, Etana, stands out sharply. He is described in tradition as a shepherd who ascended to heaven. The story attached to him, preserved in later forms, speaks of an eagle, a journey upward, and the search for birth or succession. A king flying with an eagle? The image is strange, so strange and beautiful. A fringed tidbit often turns Etana into a symbol of ancient sky travel, secret fertility rites, or celestial contact. Mainstream scholars read the story as mythic literature concerned with kingship, legitimacy, and the need for an heir. Yet even the careful reading is haunting. The king's problem is not merely rule, it is continuation. Without a child, the line trembles. Without succession, authority becomes a lamp without oil. You enter a courtyard where a scribe sits beneath a patched awning. His tablet rests on a board. He records deliveries of grain and labour obligations with an expression of deep, ancient boredom. Nearby, a guard leans on a spear and tries not to fall asleep. This is the earthly face of kingship. Divine descent may sound magnificent, but someone still needs to count barley. The crown depends on quantities. The city's power depends on storage, rationing, planning, and trust. A ruler who cannot feed workers will not seem chosen for very long. A ruler who cannot organize irrigation will watch fields fail. A ruler who cannot defend roads and canals will lose goods, prestige, and perhaps his head, which tends to damage legitimacy. Ancient kingship is sheer, but it is also managerial. Records from early Mesopotamia show that administration and rule were deeply connected. Tablets record commodities, workers, fields, animals, and transactions. Major universities have studied these records to reconstruct the systems beneath political life. The result is less glamorous than golden crowns, but more revealing. Power in Kish was not only shouted from a throne, it was measured in grain jars, labour days, and seals. You pass a workshop where potters shape vessels on a turning surface. The clay spins, hands steady it. A pot rises from a lump into a useful form. That motion feels like the city itself. Raw earth becomes container, human labour becomes structure, authority becomes something people can carry, store, stamp, and distribute. The king is part of that forming. He is shaped by the city as much as he shapes it. The scholarly debate around Kish concerns its exact role in early Mesopotamian political history. Some researchers see it as a major centre whose title later carried broad prestige. Others caution that the King List may exaggerate or reshape its importance for ideological reasons. A careful view recognises both the site's real significance and the scribal habit of turning political memory into orderly tradition. You feel that tension in the streets. Kish is real earth and arranged memory at the same time. Its ruins belong to archaeology. Its role as the first seat of kingship after the flood belongs to a crafted vision of the past. These are not enemies. They are two layers of the same mound. One layer holds pottery, another holds meaning. The human crown begins there, in the meeting of evidence and claim. You stand near a gate as traders approach with loaded animals. Their packs carry textiles, dull grain, perhaps metal objects from far away. The gatekeepers inspect, question, mark, and wave them through. A city such as Kish lives by exchange as well as rule. Goods travel, news travels, names travel. A ruler's reputation moves beyond his walls through merchants, messengers, and soldiers. No king rules only the place where he sleeps. His name must travel farther than his body. That is another kind of inheritance. A royal name spreads through spoken reports, sealed goods, tribute, marriages, victories, and scribal lists. It becomes known before it becomes remembered. It becomes remembered before it becomes ancient. The process is slow, practical, and fragile. A lost tablet, a defeated army, or a hostile scribe can change the future's memory of a man. Kish, in the royal imagination, turns survival into legitimacy. The flood has passed. The world is soaked but unlevgin. Kingship descends again, and this time it attaches to a city that feels closer to human breath. Here, rulers need heirs, stores, walls, roads, and scribes. They need people willing to work under the name of orders. You look toward the palace quarter, imagined from fragments and later parallels. It is not a fairy palace, it is mud brick. Rooms, courtyards, thresholds, storages, spaces, officials, guards, servants, complaints, meals, and the endless creak of administration. The king may be sacred, but his house has dust in the corners. That detail is oddly reassuring. Power always has dust, even sacred power. The crown of Kish is therefore not only a symbol of rebirth, it is a reminder that kingship, once returned to the world, becomes entangled with ordinary human need. It must feed, tax, defend, marry, build, repair. And remember, the king's body may be imagined as chosen, but his rule is tested by canals and granaries. The hidden record of Sumerian kings becomes more earthly here. It is no longer only the code of primeval figures or drowned time. It is the code of functioning authority. The ruler who lasts must connect divine claim with material success. Heaven may lower kingship, but mud brick judges whether it stands. Evening gathers over Kish. The repaired walls glow red in the low light. Smoke rises from hearths. The last traders lead animals through the gate. A scribe wraps a tablet in cloth somewhere. A child laughs near a puddle left by the receding water. The city does not know that later generations will make it a hinge in the story of kingship. It simply endures. That is enough. You watch the first stars appear above the roofs. The crown of Kish rests not on a giant, not on an immortal, but on a city trying to organize life after loss. Its kings carry the memory of divine order into a world of wet streets and hungry mouths. Their authority is still mysterious, but it has become touchable. And in that touchable world, the ancient line begins to feel more dangerous, because it is no longer safely distant. It has entered the city gate. It has entered ration lists, household doors, and human ambition. Kingship has returned from the flood, and now it must prove itself among people who wake each morning needing bread, protection, and a reason to believe the crown belongs where it sits. The road bends toward Uruk, and the air begins to feel crowded before the walls appear. You sense the city first as pressure, a gathering of voices, animals, smoke, and movement. Then the walls rise from the plain, broad and sun-struck, holding within them a world that seems too large for one human life to contain. Uruk is not a whispering settlement at the marsh edge. Uruk is a statement. Its streets pulse with craft, trade, ritual, and noise. Potters turn clay, metal workers hammer tools, bakers pull flat loaves from ovens, donkeys push through narrow passages with the offended dignity of creatures who know they are essential, above the dust and heat. Temple precincts lift toward the sky, and the city seems to say that human beings can build something vast enough to frighten themselves. Archaeology confirms that Uruk was one of the great early urban centres of southern Mesopotamia. Research connected with major institutions has shown its importance in the development of writing, administration, monumental architecture, and large-scale city life. The Uruk period marks a transformation in human social complexity, where settlement, labour, record-keeping, and ritual became woven into a new urban form. That is the firm historical ground. Yet Uruk is also a city of legend. Here the memory of Gilgamesh rises, half king, half story, and impossible to reduce to either. In the Sumerian King List, Gilgamesh appears among the rulers of Uruk, with a reign length far beyond ordinary expectation, though not as vast as the kings before the flood. In later epic tradition, he becomes 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, a ruler of immense strength, pride, grief, and longing. You pass through the gate in imagination. The heat inside the city is different. It is trapped between walls. It smells of brick dust, dates, sweat, wool, animals, and hot bitumen. Somewhere, a brewer stirs a vat, somewhere else. A scribe argues over quantities with the seriousness of a man defending civilization from bad arithmetic. A child runs past, laughing, then vanishes behind a doorway. Uruk feels alive enough to resist sleep. Yet the story of Gilgamesh brings sleep closer in another way, because it is a story about mortality. The king is powerful, perhaps too powerful. He builds walls, commands labour, and stands above others. But the body remains a problem. Strength cannot negotiate with death forever. Kingship cannot seal the grave. Even a ruler touched by divinity discovers that his breath is temporary. This is why Gilgamesh matters. He is not only a heroic figure, he is the wound inside royal ideology. A king may be enlarged by art, exalted by titles, and remembered by scribes, but he still fears the end. The epic tradition turns that fear into a journey. Gilgamesh meets friendship, loss, wildness, wisdom, and the cold knowledge that no crown can make flesh permanent. You enter a street near a great wall. The bricks are rough beneath your palm. Later tradition credits Gilgamesh with building Uruk's walls, a claim that turns architecture into biography. Whether the historical king built them in any direct extent is uncertain, but the association is powerful. A wall outlives a body. It lets a king's ambition stand after his bones are gone. That is one answer to mortality. Build something too heavy to forget. A mainstream take is that the Epic of Gilgamesh survives in several ancient versions and became one of the most studied works of Mesopotamian literature. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have examined its development from Sumerian poems into later Akkadian compositions. The text is not simply royal praise. It is literature that thinks deeply about friendship, fame, kingship, and death. It is also strangely intimate. Gilgamesh is excessive and at times unpleasant. He burdens his people. He is strong enough to be admired and arrogant enough to be exhausting. The gods create Enkidu as a balance, a wild companion who becomes his friend. Through that friendship, the king becomes more human. Through Enkidu's death, he becomes terrified. The mighty king grieves. That detail changes everything. If the ancient rulers were only divine machines, grief would not matter, but Gilgamesh weeps. He touches loss. He discovers that power cannot protect what he loves. In that sorrow, the royal body is pulled down from the sky and returned to the earth. The king becomes someone you can understand even if you would not necessarily want him as a neighbour. He seems intense, very intense. Uruk holds that contradiction beautifully. Its monumental spaces suggest superhuman order. Its crowded streets reveal ordinary human mess. The king stands between these worlds, inflated by legend and pierced by mortality. In the hidden record of Sumerian kings, Gilgamesh becomes a crucial figure because he makes divine descent emotionally unstable. He carries sacred blood in story, yet he suffers like any person. A fringe tidbit often surrounds Gilgamesh with speculation about unusual ancestry. His description as partly divine has inspired claims of hybrid bloodlines, preserved memories of enhanced rulers, or ancient beings mingling with humanity. Mainstream scholars treat this as mythic language expressing status, power, and divine association. Yet the image remains compelling because it gives kingship a biological feeling, as if authority were literally mixed into the body. The phrase two-thirds divine is especially haunting. It sounds almost like a measurement. Ancient literature, of course, does not use it as modern genetics. It speaks in sacred proportion, not laboratory analysis. Yet the imagination hears a formula. The king is neither fully god nor fully ordinary. He is a combination, a being with too much power for peace and too much mortality for comfort. You walk toward the temple precinct as evening approaches. The sky deepens to copper. Doves scatter from a roof, shadows gather in doorways, and the great structures of Uruk become darker against the light. A singer somewhere begins a low chant, and the words travel through alleys like smoke. The scholarly debate around Gilgamesh concerns the relationship between the possible historical king and the literary hero. Some researchers accept that a ruler of Uruk may stand behind the tradition. Others emphasize that the literary figure has been transformed so thoroughly that the historical person cannot be recovered with confidence. A careful voice says the legend preserves memory, but not in a form that behaves like biography. That uncertainty is not for failures, it is the nature of deep memory. Uruk remembers Gilgamesh not because he can be neatly verified in every detail, but because he expresses what kingship feels like when stretched between heaven and death. He is the ruler who builds, dominates, loves, loses, searches, and returns without the prize he wanted. He does not defeat mortality, he learns its boundary. In the epic, wisdom comes not as escape, but as acceptance. The city wall remains, the human life ends, fame may travel through words and brick, but the body goes down into silence. That is not a loud conclusion, it is a slow, heavy truth, suitable for a night when the room around you grows still. You stand on the wall and look across the plain. The land beyond Uruk darkens. Somewhere out there lies wilderness, river, marsh, and the imagined road of the grieving king. Inside the walls, lamps begin to appear one by one. The city becomes a constellation made by human hands. It is beautiful, fragile, and slightly ridiculous in its confidence. 1,000 small lights pretending they can answer the dark. Perhaps that is civilization. Perhaps that is kingship too. Gilgamesh carries the memory of superhuman rule because he shows both halves of the royal illusion. He is larger than life, yet trapped inside life. His ancestry and story points upward, but his grief pulls him downward. He seeks a secret that might defeat death, and he returns with knowledge instead of immortality. The wall remains beneath your hand. Warm brick slowly cools in the night air. You feel the texture of it, rough and patient, built by labourers whose names are mostly lost. The king is remembered, the workers vanish. That is another quiet cruelty of history, and the tablets do not entirely repair it. Still, Uruk shining to... Its memory of Gilgamesh does not close the question of royal blood, it deepens it. The greatest king is not great because he escapes humanity. He is great because he reveals its limit. In him, divine descent becomes restless, mortal and wounded. The ancient record gives you a ruler who may be part god in poetry, but whose deepest truth is fear, love, and the knowledge that even kings must return to dust. The entrance is almost hidden beneath the shadow of the ziggurat. It is not a grand doorway with carved lions and polished stone. It is lower, narrower, and half covered by wind-blown dust. A person could pass it every day and never understand that darkness beneath a holy tower has its own kind of memory. You descend, the air cools at once. Heat fades from your skin, the smell changes from open city dust to packed earth. Old brick, and the dry bitterness of sealed rooms. Your hand touches the wall as you move downward, and the bricks feel rough, uneven, and faintly gritty. Somewhere above, priests may be singing. Down here, the sound arrives only as vibration. The ziggurat belongs to the world of height, ritual, and visible devotion. It rises so that humans may approach the gods, or at least appear to approach them with impressive architectural confidence. The chamber beneath belongs to another world. It is lower, darker, and more patient. It holds what power cannot display too openly. Not treasure, records. Clay tablets rest in baskets and on shelves. Cylinder seals lie in small containers. A few bone fragments, carefully wrapped, sit beside labels whose ink has long faded. There are broken votive figures, temple inventories, royal inscriptions, and fragments of lists copied from older lists. Nothing here gleams much, which is usually how you know something matters. Gold seduces. Clay testifies. In ancient Mesopotamia, archives were found in temples, palaces, private houses, and administrative buildings. Excavations at sites such as Nippur, and Ebla revealed how tablets could accumulate in rooms, jars, baskets, and collapsed shelves. Researchers connected with the University of Pennsylvania, Yale, and Chicago have studied these archives to reconstruct economic life, literature, law, religion, and political memory. That evidence gives the hidden chamber its plausibility. You move between shelves where tablets lean like sleeping animals. Some are large enough to require both hands, others are no bigger than a palm. They hold accounts of sheep, barley, labourers, offerings, land, names, and obligations. There are also hymns, omens, myths, rituals, and royal claims. A civilization has been compressed into hardened mud. The room is not arranged like a modern library. There are no printed labels, no calm alphabet, no helpful person at a desk silently judging your search habits. Instead, the order depends on habit, container, shelf, topic, shape, and the memory of those who serve the institution. An archive can be systematic without being friendly. You step carefully. A tablet cracked underfoot would feel like a small murder. The imagined library beneath the ziggurat gathers several kinds of evidence into one darkness. Tablets hold names and claims. Seals show identity and authority. Bones remind you that all claims finally pass through bodies. Royal inscriptions praise conquest and building. Temple inventories reveal what institutions needed to survive. Together, these objects create a layered portrait of kingship. A king is not only a name, he is a network. His authority appears in ration lists, building works, divine offerings, labour organisation, seal impressions, marriages, military acts, and later copies of older traditions. To look for the hidden record of Sumerian kings is to stop looking for one secret tablet. It is to notice how many ordinary things were required to make a ruler real. The chamber teaches patience. You pause beside a shelf of administrator's tablets. They are dull at first glance, and then they become strangely alive. A flock is counted, a worker receives grain, a field is measured, an official is named. Such records are not dramatic, yet they expose the reach of authority more honestly than a victory hymn. A king who can command memory in daily records has already entered the lives of people who may never see him. This is the underside of sacred kingship. It has ledgers. A mainstream fact from archaeological research is that many Mesopotamian tablets were preserved because buildings burned or collapsed, accidentally firing or sealing the clay. Destruction, perversely, became conservation. The event that ruined a room sometimes saved its records for distant readers. Ancient catastrophe has a very strange sense of humour. The thought is grimly funny. The shelves seem to agree. You see how a library beneath a ziggurat becomes more than a storage room. It becomes a model of civilization itself. Above, ritual reaches toward heaven. Below, records hold the earthly machine together. The two parts need one another. A temple without records cannot manage its offerings. An archive without sacred meaning is only bureaucracy in the dark, which is a little too depressing even for ancient administration. In this hidden archive, bones change the mood. They do not speak like tablets, yet they carry biological truth. Modern archaeology can sometimes study ancient remains for diet, disease, migration, ancestry, and kinship. In Mesopotamia, preservation conditions vary and not every question can be answered. Still, bones remind you that behind every royal claim was a body made of hunger, injury, age, and breath. The scholarly debate around combining textual and biological evidence is careful and ongoing. Some researchers emphasize that texts reveal social identity, while bones reveal aspects of physical life. Others warn that neither kind of evidence is complete alone. The most responsible interpretation lets clay and bone speak together, without forcing one to confirm every dream of the other. That is important. Text can lie with elegance. Bones can stay sudden with equal confidence. A royal inscription may say a king was chosen, mighty, beloved, and victorious. A skeleton may reveal stress, disease, injury, or ancestry, but it will not explain divine favour. A tablet may place a ruler in a sacred line. Bone chemistry may suggest movement or diet. Neither gives the whole person back. They only open different doors. You lean over a wrapped bundle. It is not identified as a king. That uncertainty matters. In popular imagination, every ancient bone in a secret room belongs to a ruler, a priest, or someone who knew too much. In reality, most human remains belong to people whose names never entered grand lists. Workers, children, servants, mothers, craftsmen, and forgotten elders fill the soil of history far more densely than kings. The forbidden library must make room for them. Without them, kingship has no body. A fringe tidbit sometimes imagines that royal bones from Sumer might contain extraordinary genetic markers proving divine ancestry or non-human descent. No accepted scientific evidence has demonstrated such a thing. What ancient remains can show, when preserved and properly studied, is the complexity of human populations, movement, kinship gears, and health. The true strangeness may be less spectacular but more profound. Kings were human, and their power depended on making humanity appear insufficient without them. You continue deeper. The passage narrows. In a side chamber, cylinder seals are stored with unusual care. Each seal is a small cylinder carved with images and signs rolled over wet clay to create an impression. It is both tool and identity, art and authorization. Seals could mark containers, doors, documents, and transactions. Their designs carried personal, institutional, and symbolic meaning. You lift one in imagination. It is cool and smooth. When rolled, it creates a repeating scene, almost like time itself unspooling. A figure approaches a seated god, another holds a standard. Animals walk in an eternal procession. The seal does not merely decorate clay, it says, this act is recognized, this hand has standing, this transaction belongs inside an authorized world. That is another layer of the royal code. Authority must be repeatable. A king cannot stand beside every jar, door, contract, or shipment. His system needs signs that travel in his absence. Seals, titles, offices, and formats extend power beyond the body. Stone. They allow kingship to multiply itself into daily life, quietly and efficiently. It is less glamorous than a crown, but possibly more effective. The library beneath the ziggurat hums with that multiplication. Every tablet is a fragment of delegated authority. Every seal is a portable witness. Every bone is a reminder that the living system required mortal carriers. Every broken statue is a frozen prayer. Together, they form the archive of a world where heaven, earth, office, and body are never fully separate. You reach the deepest room. There is little light here. A single lamp burns in a niche, its flame trembling in stale air. Before you rests a low table with several tablets, a seal, and a small box of bone or ivory. The arrangement looks deliberate, though its meaning is uncertain. The objects do not spell out a secret, they create a question. What did the ancients believe a king carried? Blood, yes, perhaps, but also office, name, divine favour, city memory, temple recognition, scribal arrangement, and public obedience. No single substance holds all of that. The royal body is only one vessel among many. The archive shows a dispersed kingship spread through matter, record, symbol, and ritual. That is more unsettling than a hidden vault of impossible bones. A single secret can be found. A system surrounds you. The ziggurat above reaches toward the sky, but the library below teaches that power also descends into storage rooms. It hides in lists, seals, baskets, and the careful wrapping of fragments. It survives because people organize it, becomes ancient because later hands keep copying it. And in the deep quiet beneath the sacred tower, you feel that the true forbidden record is not one tablet marked with royal blood. It is the entire machinery by which a civilization persuaded itself that some names deserve to outlive all others. A name waits longer than a body. It can pass from mouth to mouth, from tablet to tablet, from seal to seal, until the person who first carried it has become unreachable. You stand in a room filled not with bones, crowns, or weapons, but with names. They lie in columns on clay, small and compressed, each one carrying more weight than its marks can honestly explain. The air is dry here. It smells of dust, old reed, and lamp oil. A shelf leans slightly beneath the burden of tablets. On one surface, a royal name appears beside a city. On another, a worker's name appears beside a ration. In a hymn, a god's name glows with sacred force. In a contract, a witness name seals responsibility. The ancient world is stitched together by names. Names are not decoration in Sumerian memory. They are claims. A name can declare devotion to a god, loyalty to a city, descent from a household, or hope placed upon a child. Some names preserve divine elements, some remember professions, some echo places, family ties, and ritual expectations. The name becomes a small vessel into which society pours meaning. You lean closer to one tablet. The signs are too small for comfort. The Sumerian and Akkadian naming traditions studied by scholars at Yale, Harvard, and Chicago show how personal names could contain sentences, divine references, blessings, petitions, and social information. This is a mainstream historical fact supported by thousands of tablets. ancient names were often meaningful expressions, not empty labels. They carried fragments of belief into daily use. A child could carry a prayer as a name. A ruler could carry legitimacy. A city could carry memory through every person who belonged to it. This is where names begin to resemble symbolic ancient deoxyribonucleic acid, not in the body, not in the blood, not in hidden strands beneath skin, but in repeated cultural markers. A name transmits belonging. It can preserve a god's favour, a family ambition, or an ancestral memory. It can mark someone as part of a system before that person has done anything at all. That's quietly unsettling. You imagine a newborn being named in a courtyard at dawn. The air smells of milk, warm clay, and crushed herbs. A grandmother sits close, pretending not to supervise everyone while supervising absolutely everything. The father speaks the name. The mother listens with tired eyes. Servants carry water. A scribe may not be present, but the future of the name has already begun. The child is not only being called, the child is being placed. Placed within a household, placed beneath a god, placed inside a city's expectations, placed in relation to ancestors whose own names may be remembered, softened, shortened, or half forwarded. In this sense, a name is an entrance. It admits the child into a network older than the child's breath. For kings, the stakes are higher. A royal name must sound like continuity. It must connect the ruler to gods, cities, ancestors, heroic memory, or sacred favour. Even when a king gains power through force, his name and titles help polish the event into destiny. Conquest can look rather rude at first. Good titulary gives it a robe, a hymn, and an official expression. The room almost smiles. Then the silence returns. In the tablets, royal names move like markers through generations. Some names repeat. Some are built with divine elements. Some are tied to famous cities. Some later rulers adopt names that echo prestige from the past. The name becomes a portable monument. It can be carried by a person, but it can also outlive that person and wait for another body. A scholarly debate continues around how much personal names reveal about ethnicity, language, religious identity, and family origin. Some researchers use names to trace population movement and cultural contact. Others warn that names can be adopted, translated, imitated, or changed for social reasons. The careful position is that names are powerful evidence, but never simple evidence. A name can tell the truth. A name can also dress for court. You walk past tablets where names from different languages and traditions appear together. The city is never as pure as royal ideology wants it to be. Traders arrive, workers migrate, captives are settled, families intermarry, gods are borrowed, honoured, renamed, or placed beside older gods. Names reveal this movement because they carry traces of contact. The hidden record of kings is therefore not sealed inside one bloodline. It is scattered through naming patterns, titles, family claims, and divine references. The code is social. It tells who belongs, who is elevated, who is remembered, and who is allowed to stand near power. A king's name may seem singular, but it is surrounded by thousands of other names that make his rule possible. You notice a humble worker's name beside a ration of barley. It feels small. It is not. Without such names, the king's world collapses into empty praise. The worker digs canals, carries bricks, harvests fields, pulls boats, serves temples, and feeds the machine that makes royal greatness visible. His name on a ration tablet may be the only trace of him, yet it proves that kingship required countless human lives. The royal line depends on people whose names are not sung. That is one of history's darker jokes. The smallest tablets may hold the largest truth. A fringe tidbit sometimes claims that Sumerian names encode hidden star origins or secret genealogies from beings beyond Earth. Such claims are not accepted by mainstream scholarship, yet they grow from a real feature of ancient naming. Names often do encode belief. They preserve divine relationships, family hopes, and social identity. They are codes, but human codes, sacred codes, political codes, household codes. That may be strange enough. You pick up an imagined tablet bearing a royal name. Its signs form a structure the scribe would recognize instantly. To you, it feels like a mask. Behind the name stands a body, perhaps taller, perhaps tired, perhaps vain, perhaps frightened. Behind the body stands a household. Behind the household stands a city. Behind the city stand gods, archives, fields, and older rulers. The name is the visible tip. The rest descends into darkness. This is why ancient names mattered in succession. A prince's name could be chosen with care. A title could proclaim him beloved of a god or legitimate heir. A later inscription could place him inside a chain of fathers and forefathers. The act is not biological proof in the modern sense. It is social proof. It tells the audience how to read the body before them. The king enters the room already interpreted. That is a remarkable achievement. You hear a distant sound. Perhaps a bell from a temple courtyard. Perhaps only clay settling on a shelf. The chamber feels filled with whispering identities. Each name repeats itself silently, asking to be held in order. The King List does this on a grand scale. It turns names into sequence, but everyday tablets do it more intimately. They show that civilization itself is a net of named obligations. Names bind people to work. Names bind offerings to gods. Names bind children to families. Names bind rulers to the past. In modern life, people still feel this. A family name can open doors or close them. A title can change a room. A famous surname can make strangers behave differently before a person speaks. We may smile at ancient claims of divine names, but we still live among social codes attached to identity. Humanity has not become as modern as it likes to think. The lamp gives a small hiss. A moth circles the flame and vanishes into shadow. You look down again at the clay. The names remain calm. They do not care whether you believe in their full claims. They have survived because they were written. That survival gives them authority of a different kind. The body is gone, but the name still occupies space in the world. Perhaps this is the oldest form of immortality available to kings. Not eternal life, don't kill. Recorded identity. A name pressed into clay becomes a second body, dry and durable. It does not eat, age, or sleep. It cannot feel fear. It can be broken, buried, misread, or forgotten. But it can also wake after thousands of years when another hand lifts the tablet. In that moment, the name breathes through attention. The Forbidden Library does not contain genetic records in the modern sense. It contains something more elusive and more human. It contains the ancient belief that identity can be transmitted through signs, titles, divine references, and remembered sequence. It contains names that behave like seeds, waiting in clay until history gives them darkness, then light, then a voice. You set the tablet down gently. The room seems full of sleeping seeds, and as the lamp dims, you understand that the royal code of Sumer may not lie in blood alone. It lies in the names that outlived blood, names carrying gods, cities, offices, hopes, fears, and ambitions across the centuries. Each one is a tiny archive, Kyo. Each one is a marker of belonging. Each one says that a human life, once named and written, can continue moving through time long after the body has become dust. The corridor narrows and the light becomes softer. You enter a chamber where the records no longer shout of kings, battles, walls, and sacred descent. They speak instead through quieter signs, through women's names placed beside offerings, property, priestly titles, and household ties. The room feels less like a throne hall and more like a locked chest. opened after centuries of silence. There is wax smoke in the air. It clings to woven cloth and wooden beams. A bronze bowl rests near the wall, its rim dulled by handling. A tablet lies beside a seal impression, and the marks upon it preserve a name that official royal memory might have left in the margins. Yet here, in this smaller record, the name matters. A woman stands at the centre of the hidden line. Not always visible, not always fairly, but repeatedly. Royal lists tend to make history look like a procession of men. One king follows another. One throne passes to another male name. One dynasty rises, then falls, then another takes its place. It is neat, persuasive, and incomplete. Beneath such lists moved mothers, wives, daughters, priestesses, widows, and palace women whose roles shaped succession more deeply than a bare list admits. The ancient record confirms that high-status women in Mesopotamia could hold property, manage estates, sponsor religious offerings, correspond with officials, and occupy powerful temple positions. Studies from major universities have shown that women's legal and economic roles varied by period and city, but they were never simply absent from public life. Their traces remain in contracts, seals, letters, and temple archives. You see one such trace in the clay, a name beside land, a name beside grain, and a name beside a god. The marks are small, but their implication is large. Royal blood does not travel through fathers alone. Every king has a mother, and ancient courts knew very well that a mother's identity could strengthen or weaken a claim. Her family, city status, and temple connections might make a prince more acceptable or more dangerous depending on the arrangement. That is the quiet arithmetic of dynasties. A marriage could bind two houses, a daughter could be sent into a sacred office, a queen could act as a political partner, ritual figure, estate holder, or mother of heirs. A widow could preserve continuity during uncertainty. None of this needs to appear in the king list to matter. Power often works hardest where official summaries are most silent. You imagine a royal daughter leaving the palace at dawn. Her attendants walk behind her, carrying folded garments and sealed vessels. She does not walk as a private person, she walks as a living alliance. The dust touches her sandals, the city watches. Perhaps musicians play softly, perhaps a scribe notes the gifts, perhaps she keeps her face calm because everyone expects her to represent more than herself. That is a heavy burden, especially before breakfast. Her destination may be a temple household, a marriage arrangement, or a ceremonial duty, whatever the exact form. Her body carries political meaning. She may be beloved by her family, or not. She may be devout, ambitious, frightened, bored, brilliant, or quietly furious. The record rarely gives you her full inner life, gives you her position, yet position is not nothings. One mainstream example from later southern Mesopotamia is the office of high priestess at Ur, where royal daughters were sometimes installed in religious roles connected with the moon god. The most famous early example is Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon of Akkad. Known from tradition as a priestess and poet, scholars continue to discuss the authorship and transmission of hymns associated with her. But her historical importance remains profound. Her presence changes the archive. Through figures like her, you can see how a royal woman could carry ideology into sacred language. She was not merely a daughter placed somewhere useful, she became a voice of devotion, authority, and identity. The line of kings could pass through her not by enthronement, but by ritual force and literary memory. The chamber grows warmer. A lamp flame trembles near a tablet basket. Its light catches the edge of a cylinder seal, where a woman may be shown approaching a deity or standing within a ritual scene. The figure is small, but not meaningless. Ancient images often compress status into posture, clothing, and placement. To read them well requires patience. a scholarly debate remains active around how much agency elite women held in these systems. Some historians emphasize that women were used by male dynasties to secure alliances and religious legitimacy. Others point to evidence that some women managed resources, commissioned works, influenced politics, and shaped cultural memory. The truth likely shifts by individual, period, and circumstance, which is inconvenient but honest. The ancient world refuses to be simple. That refusal is useful. It prevents you from turning women into either powerless shadows or secret rulers of everything. Both extremes flatten them. The records suggest a more complex human reality. Some women endured arrangements chosen for them. Some used those arrangements skillfully. Some were remembered by title only. Some left names strong enough to survive the collapse of walls. You move past a low table where small personal ornaments rest. Beads, pins, and fragments of metalwork lie beside broken seals. These objects can feel intimate after so many royal claims. They touched skin, they fastened garments, and they moved with breathing bodies. A bead can outlast the woman who wore it, but it cannot tell you whether she laughed easily or trusted anyone. History often preserves the object and loses the voice. That is one of its cruelties. A quirky fringe tidbit suggests that Sumerian royal women may have guarded hidden maternal bloodlines believed to carry divine ancestry more purely than kings themselves. There is no accepted evidence for such a secret genetic doctrine. Yet the fantasy grows from a real historical pattern. Women could be crucial to legitimacy while remaining underrepresented in official narratives. The hidden line often passes through the quietest doorway. You consider the mother of a king. Her name may appear in some records, vanish in others, or become part of a later claim. If she belongs to a prestigious family, her son's status improves. If she is tied to a temple, his sacred aura deepens. If she comes from a rival city, his body becomes a treaty made flesh. Birth is biological, but legitimacy is interpretation. A baby does not know he is an heir. Adults explain it for him. They wrap him in names, titles, expectations, and danger. They decide which ancestry counts. They decide which woman's status matters. They decide which marriage was lawful, sacred, strategic, or embarrassing enough to be smoothed out later by a very loyal scribe. Royal birth is not only an event, it is a story managed from the beginning. You hear soft footsteps behind a curtain. Women speak in lowered voices. Their words are lost, but their presence fills the room. Perhaps they discuss household accounts. Perhaps a servant has failed in a task. Perhaps a queen is deciding which offering must be sent and which official must be reminded, gently, that forgetfulness is not a survival skill. The tone is calm. The power is real. In the hidden archive of Sumerian kings, women carry continuity through channels the King List cannot fully show. They transmit alliance, ritual status, and remembered descent. They create heirs, but also contexts in which those heirs can be accepted. They stand at the threshold between private body and public claim. That threshold is one of the oldest places where history is made. A crown may be placed on a man's head in public, but the reasons it fits may have been arranged long before, in a marriage chamber, in a temple office, in a mother's lineage, in a seal pressed beside a property transfer, in a daughter's journey from one sacred household to another. The visible moment rests on invisible preparation. You sit near the wall as the lamp burns lower. The room does not feel empty now. It feels crowded with women who are necessary to royal time. Whether or not royal time spoke their names loudly, their silence is not absence. It is a layer of the record that must be approached carefully, without forcing it to say more than it can, and without ignoring what it clearly holds. The tablets remain still, the seals remain cool, the ornaments no longer shine, but they continue to suggest touch. And in that quiet, you understand that the Forbidden Library has misled careless readers for generations. It seemed at first to preserve a line of kings. It also preserves the hidden labour of lineage itself. The women who carried the line did not always rule from thrones, but they shaped the conditions under which the thrones could be inherited, defended, and believed. Their record is quieter than a royal list. It may also be closer to the blood. The room changes again, and the dream of certainty begins to thin. The tablets remain, but now they are surrounded by voices that do not bow before them too quickly. You hear the careful murmur of scholars, not ancient scribes, but modern readers seated beneath white library lights, turning photographs, transliterations, and broken copies into cautious argument. It is a quieter kind of excavation. No shovel enters the soil. Instead, a word is weighed, a sign is compared, a damaged line is studied until the eyes ache. One scholar sees royal ideology, another sees mythic time, another sees a political attempt to organise rival city traditions. Someone else, inevitably, asks whether the scribe copied the number correctly, which is less dramatic, but often very important. This is where the forbidden library becomes less obedient. It does not simply give you secrets, it resists you. Every tablet has a condition, every version has a history, every broken edge removes something that later curiosity wants desperately. The clay does not care. It has survived too long to flatter modern impatience. Major universities and museums have treated the Sumerian King List as one of the essential documents for understanding early Mesopotamian kingship. Yet scholars do not read it as a straightforward chronicle. Its mixture of mythical rulers, symbolic reign lengths, real city names, and later political structure makes it a difficult text. It is precious evidence, but also a crafted memory. That distinction matters. Evidence is not always the same as fact. A tablet can prove that an ancient tradition existed. It does not automatically prove that every claim inside that tradition happened exactly as written. This may sound obvious, but obvious things are often the first casualties of excitement. The Forbidden Library attracts grand theories because its contents are old, strange, and incomplete. Incompleteness is very fertile soil. You sit at a long wooden table in an imagined research room. The scent is not incense now, but paper, pencil dust, coffee, and the faint chill of climate control. A photograph of a tablet lies before you. Around it are notes, hand copies, sign lists, and books that look as if they could injure a foot if dropped. Scholarship has its own hazards. A researcher traces a line with one finger. The early rains are too long for ordinary history. The flood divides the sequence. Later kings sometimes connect with rulers known from other records. Cities appear in a pattern that suggests an attempt to place competing traditions into one orderly frame. The text is not nonsense, it is not simple truth either. It is a machine for making the past meaningful. That phrase rests in the mind. A machine for meaning? The open, scholarly debate around the King List is not whether it is important. Almost everyone agrees that it is. The debate concerns what kind of importance it carries. Is it a political document, a theological statement, a literary composition, a historical source with mythic layers? Many careful researchers answer yes, in different proportions. Ancient texts enjoy being inconvenient. They often do several things at once. This is especially true of royal lists. A list looks plain. It appears to remove drama by placing names and numbers in order. Yet order itself is an argument. To list kings in a sequence is to decide whose rule belongs, whose rule is ignored, which city follows which, and where history should begin. A list can be colder than a poem and more political than a battle hymn. You look again at the royal names. They seem less like a transparent window and more like arranged stones in a garden. Someone placed them with care. Perhaps older traditions were gathered. Perhaps local memories were compressed. Perhaps inconvenient overlaps were smoothed into succession. Perhaps dynasties that once competed were made to follow one another politely, which is not usually how human beings behave in real time. Real politics is messy. Messy. Lists are tidy. That tidiness always can deceive me. One mainstream historical fact is that Mesopotamian scribes often copied and recopied older texts across centuries. This produced both preservation and variation. Scholars comparing manuscript traditions can see differences in wording, order, spelling, and omissions. Variation reveals that ancient texts had lives. They move through time, and movement leaves marks. The Sumerian King List is part of that living manuscript world. It is not one frozen object from a single moment. It is a tradition known through different copies and fragments. That means the text has a history of transmission. When you read it, you are not hearing one voice only. You are hearing a corridor of voices, some loud, some damaged, and some correcting others in the dark. The idea of deoxyribonucleic acid records becomes more delicate here. A modern scholar would reject the claim that the King List is genetic evidence, yet the metaphor still has value if handled carefully. The list transmits cultural instructions about power. It says kingship has divine origin. It says authority moves through cities. It says the flood divides time. It says royal memory must be organized. These are not genes. They are rules. Rules can reproduce. A scribe copies them. A king uses them. A temple approves them. A student memorizes them. A later dynasty adapts them. The code survives not because it is hidden in blood, but because institutions repeat it. That repetition makes it powerful. Cultural inheritance can shape behaviour as deeply as family resemblance shapes a face. A quirky fringe tidbit claims that scholars are suppressing the true meaning of Sumerian royal records because the tablets reveal ancient non-human ancestry. There is no credible evidence for such suppression. The reality is almost the opposite. Specialists argue openly, publish competing interpretations, and cheerfully disagree over damaged signs that most people would mistake for decorative scratches. Academic disagreement is not a locked vault. It is often a very slow thunderstorm in footnotes. And yet the sense of hiddenness remains, not because anyone is hiding one obvious answer, because the material itself is partial. You cannot interview the scribe. You cannot ask the temple official whether he believed the first kings lived for thousands of years. You cannot stand in an ancient assembly and hear how common people spoke about royal descent when no priest or guard was near. The past is not silent, but it does not become fully available. This is the scholar's discipline, to listen without pretending to hear everything. The chamber of doubt is therefore not an enemy of wonder. It protects wonder from becoming careless. It reminds you that the most unsettling truths in history are often not the loudest ones. They are not always hidden in secret bloodlines or impossible bones. Sometimes they lie in the way a civilization wrote uncertainty into authority, and then taught later generations to remember it as order. You notice how the modern scholar handles the tablet image. There is no worship in the gesture, but there is respect. Clay is treated as evidence, not oracle. Its claims are examined, compared, tested against archaeology, language, other texts, and an historical context. This careful work may seem less cinematic than a torchlit vault, but it is how the old world is actually approached. Slowly, patiently, with doubt as a lamp. The scholars who doubt the code do not empty the library of mystery. They make the mystery sharper. If the King List is propaganda, then why this form? If it is theology, why include real political memory? If it is history, why begin in impossible time? If it is literature, why preserve administrative precision? Each answer opens another door. That is the true forbidden quality. The text refuses to belong to one category. You sit in the pale light while night presses against the windows. Outside the research room, traffic moves through a modern city. Tires hiss on wet pavement. Somewhere a phone vibrates. absurdly confident that it matters. Inside, the ancient signs wait with better patience than any device has ever shown. The scholars continue. They doubt, compare, revise, and sometimes admit that the evidence will not carry them further. That admission is not weakness, it is honesty, and honesty is rare enough to deserve its own little shrine. The ancient scribes arranged the past to make authority feel eternal. Modern scholars disassemble that arrangement, not to destroy it, but to understand how it works. You look once more at the line of kings. It seems both weaker and stronger now. Weaker, because it cannot be read as a simple record of biological descent or literal immortality. Stronger, because it reveals a more sophisticated truth. Ancient societies created systems that made power appear natural, heavenly, inherited, and necessary. They wrote those systems so well that thousands of years later, the clay still makes the mind lean forward. The room grows still. The doubt remains calm. And in that calm, you understand that skepticism is not the closing of the forbidden library. It is the key that turns without noise. The scholars who doubt the code are not standing outside the mystery. They are deeper inside it than one who accepts the first dramatic answer. They know that ancient truth is not a single locked box. It is a set of fragments, arranged by hands, copied through centuries, and waiting for careful minds to ask what kind of memory wanted so badly to survive. The numbers begin to glow in the dark like coals under ash. They have always been there, resting beside the names, but now they seem to lean forward. A king is named. Then a reign is counted, another king follows, and another number appears. The list becomes more than memory, it becomes rhythm. You hear it almost as music. A long reign, a longer reign, a city, a transfer, a fall, a return. The pattern repeats until the mind stops asking only who ruled and begins asking why the sequence feels arranged. Ancient numbers do not merely measure, they can persuade, sanctify, exaggerate, conceal, and organize time into shapes that feel larger than ordinary life. The Sumerians and their successors used a base 60 numerical system. This is a mainstream historical fact, confirmed by mathematical tablets studied by scholars at Yale, Columbia, and the University of Chicago. That system influenced later ways of dividing circles, hours, and minutes. It was practical for calculation, but it also gave Mesopotamian numbers a distinctive structure and elegance. 60 is a patient number! It divides beautifully. That may sound like the sort of comment only a tired scribe could love, but it matters. A number that divides easily becomes useful in trade. Astronomy, land measurement, and administration can also become symbolically attractive. When you see reign lengths in the King List, especially the enormous ones before the flood, you're not simply seeing fantasy without form. You're seeing imagination shaped by a mathematical culture. The room smells of wax smoke and old dust. A counting board rests on a table. Imagine but plausible. Beside a tablet filled with columns, small tokens lie in a shallow bowl. A scribe moves them with careful fingers, perhaps counting goods, perhaps teaching a pupil, perhaps wondering why nobody appreciates the emotional burden of accurate totals. Civilization requires counting. It also requires people to complain about counting. You look at the reign lengths again. Many of the earliest numbers are not random. They fit within the sexagesimal world of Mesopotamian calculation. They are immense, but they are orderly immense. That difference matters. Chaos does not usually take such elegant administrative form. The numbers seem designed to stretch time while still keeping it within a recognizable system. The impossible becomes formatted. That is the genius of the list. A fringe tidbit often claims that the huge reigns encode astronomical cycles, precession, lost star calendars, or secret knowledge from beings who measured time on a cosmic scale. Mainstream scholarship is more cautious. Some researchers connect the numbers with symbolic mathematics, literary convention, or sacred exaggeration. Yet the idea of hidden cycles persists because the figures do seem to invite pattern hunting. The human mind loves patterns, sometimes too much. You can feel that temptation as you sit before the tablet. The numbers seem to whisper that a code is almost visible, just beneath the clay. If you add them, divide them, compare them, place them beside lunar months, river cycles, and divine numbers, perhaps the hidden system will reveal itself. Perhaps you think someone long ago built a royal clock. Then caution enters softly. Not every pattern was intended. The open scholarly debate concerns how to interpret these numerical schemes without reducing them to either nonsense or secret science. Some historians emphasize their literary function, making early kings belong to mythic time. Others explore their relationship with Mesopotamian mathematics and sacred numerology, and a careful approach allows that the numbers may be meaningful without being a modern cipher waiting to be solved. Meaning is not always code. Sometimes meaning is atmosphere. The enormous reigns create distance. They tell the listener that the oldest kings belong to a scale beyond recent memory. They are not neighbouring rulers whose disputes can be remembered by someone's grandfather. They are foundational figures placed in an age when time itself seems wider. The number does not record a birthday and death date. It builds a mood of sacred antiquity. That mood is powerful. You notice how different kinds of time gather around the list. There is human time, measured by hunger, sleep, aging, and burial. There is city time, measured by walls, canals, dynasties, and ruins. There is temple time, measured by festivals, offerings, and recurring rituals. There is cosmic time, measured by stars, seasons, and divine decisions. The King List braids them together. Kingship needs all of them. A ruler must command the day, but also claim the past. He must manage harvests, but also belong to heaven. He must die like a man, but be remembered as if time itself made room for him. Numbers help perform that transformation. They take a life and place it inside a scale chosen by the scribe. You walk through a chamber where tablets of mathematics and omens rest near royal traditions. That closeness is not accidental in the imagination of the archive. Mesopotamian scholars studied numbers, stars, signs, rituals, and kingship within a world where order could be read across many surfaces. The sky was not separate from the tablet. The omen was not separate from the throne. Modern readers divide knowledge into neat rooms. Ancient scholars often let doors remain open. A lunar eclipse might be read as a sign concerning the king. A liver omen might speak to military action. A calculation might organize labour or land. A royal list might arrange history into divine sequence. To the ancient learned mind, the world was thick with correspondences. Numbers belong to that thickness. The numbers that refuse sleep are not only long, they are connective. They connect ruler to city, city to divine order, reign to sacred measure, and memory to calculation. They make the past countable, even when the past is too large to believe literally. This is one reason the list feels like a hidden system being reconstructed. It does not merely tell you that kings ruled, it measures the distance between humanity and its imagined beginning. You touch a tablet with rows of signs and numbers. The surface is cool. A small chip has removed part of a line, leaving the total uncertain. That missing piece changes everything for the modern reader. One broken corner can disturb a calculation, and suddenly the ancient system becomes a puzzle with one piece swallowed by earth. The scribe may have known the answer clearly. You do not. This is another humility of history. Ancient certainty becomes modern guesswork. Yet the patterns remain strong enough to trouble the mind. Certain reign lengths recur in the large rounded values. Some totals seem shaped by the mathematical habits of the culture. The shift from vast antediluvian rains to shorter post-flood rains creates a narrative contraction. Time narrows, rulers become more human, history approaches. The numbers tell that story without emotion. They simply shrink. There is something deeply unsettling in that shrinking. It suggests that the world itself has changed. The earliest kings are measured in immense spans, as if they belong to a species of time no longer available. Later rulers are still grand, but their lives begin to fit more comfortably within the limits of cities and generations. The hidden timeline moves from cosmic mist toward human dust. This is not modern biology, but it feels like a transformation. A cultural species changes across the text. The first rulers are temporal giants. Later kings become political actors. The flood divides them. The numbers mark the change. In that sense, the list behaves like a fossil bed of authority, preserving not bodies but different forms of remembered power. You hear a faint tapping. A student is learning multiplication somewhere beyond the room. His teacher repeats a problem with the calm cruelty of education. The child sighs. The teacher waits. Numbers are being trained into a new mind, just as royal memory was trained into scribal hands. The code survives by teaching itself to the next generation. That is why numbers can outlive kings. A king may be forgotten. A system of counting can remain embedded in trade, astronomy, ritual, and memory. The royal numbers of the list draw strength from that wider numerical culture. They are not isolated decorations. They belong to a civilization that trusted numbers to manage both sheep and stars, which is a remarkable range of responsibility. You almost feel sorry for numbers. They had a lot to do. The chamber darkens, and the list becomes less visible. Yet the figures stay awake in your mind. 28,800, 36,000, 43,200. They are too large to accept as ordinary reigns, too structured to dismiss as careless invention. They hover between myth, mathematics, and political theology. Perhaps that is their purpose. They do not let you sleep easily because they refuse to become one thing. They are not modern dates. They are not random fairy tale ages. They are not proven astronomical keys. They are ancient numbers doing ancient work, enlarging the first kings until kingship itself seems older than human memory. The lamp bends low. The tablets remain still. In the quiet, you understand that the forgotten system is not a solved equation hidden in clay. It is a way of making time obedient. The scribes gathered names, cities, reigns, catastrophe, and divine origin, then arranged them with numerical gravity. They made the past countable, not because every number was literal, but because countable things can be governed by memory. Perhaps that is why these numbers refuse sleep. They are not merely asking how long the kings lived, they are asking how long power wants to be remembered, how far authority must stretch backward to feel eternal, and whether humanity has ever truly stopped measuring itself against impossible time. The air shifts toward movement. You no longer stand only among tablets, shrines, and numbered reigns. You stand at the edge of roads, canals, and caravan tracks, where the dust of distant places arrives on sandals, hooves, wheels, and tired human skin. Sumer is not a sealed vessel. It is a crossroads. The morning wind carries many smells. Bitumen from riverboats, wool packed for exchange, and copper touched by sweat, dates drying in woven trays, fish oil, grain dust, animal dung, and the faint resin of goods brought from lands beyond the flat horizon. The city receives them all. It receives strangers too, though it may pretend later that its royal blood was perfectly pure and magnificently tidy. History rarely grants such tidiness. Southern Mesopotamia was connected to wider networks of trade and migration from very early periods. Archaeological studies of identified materials such as metals, stones, timber, and shells that came from outside the alluvial plain. Scholars at universities such as Pennsylvania, Chicago, and Cambridge have examined how exchange linked Mesopotamia with regions including Iran, Anatolia, the Gulf, and the Indus world. That fact matters to the royal line. A city built from mud brick might seem local, rooted, and self-contained, yet many of its most valued materials came from elsewhere. Copper was not conjured from the marshes. Lapis lazuli did not grow politely beside the canals. Timber for large construction had to travel. Exotic stones, metals, and luxury goods moved through hands, languages, and loyalties before they reached temple, palace, or workshop. Power wore foreign things. That is a useful discomfort. You walk toward a market near the water. Boats press against the bank, their hulls dark with bitumen. Men unload jars, bundles, baskets, and ingots. A merchant counts under his breath. A porter sneezes from dust and is ignored by everyone, which is very on brand for labour history. Nearby, a scribe records deliveries with the solemn face of a person who knows mistakes will find him later. Voices overlap around you. Some accents are local, others are not. Words from different regions mingle in trade speech, names, measures, and bargaining gestures. The city does not remain pure at its gates. It changes with every exchange. A foreign trader marries locally, a captive becomes a worker, a craftsman moves for opportunity, a temple receives goods from distant donors. A royal household displays materials from lands its king may never personally see. This is how foreign blood enters Sumer's veins, and not always through conquest. Often through work, through marriage, service, adoption, slavery, diplomacy, trade, and the quiet decision of one family to stay where grain is available. Human movement is older than royal pride. It unsettles every fantasy of a single unbroken line. The tablets may arrange kingship in elegant sequences, but the city beneath the list is crowded with mixed origins. You notice a young man leading donkeys toward a warehouse. His name may be written in a language not native to Sumer. His mother may have come from one land, his father from another. His children may grow up speaking the city's words and worshipping its gods a generation later. Who will call them foreign a generation after that? Who will remember the question? Identity softens with time, then hardens again when power needs it. A mainstream historical fact from Mesopotamian records is that personal names often reveal linguistic and cultural diversity. Texts from different periods contain Sumerian, Akkadian, Amorite, Elamite, Hurrian, and other naming elements. Scholars use such names carefully to study migration, administration, and cultural contact, while recognizing that names can be adopted for social reasons. A name is evidence, not a passport. Still, the evidence points toward mixture. Sumer was never an untouched island. The southern cities sat within a world of exchange, rivalry, and contact. Even the language situation itself became layered, with Sumerian and Akkadian coexisting in different ways across time. Royal courts, scribal schools, temples, and markets all participated in this multilingual landscape. The hidden record becomes more complex. If kingship is imagined as descending from heaven, then its earthly carriers still live among human flows. A royal house may claim ancient purity, but its alliances may depend on foreign marriages. A city may praise its own gods, yet import goods marked by distant hands. A ruler may boast of defeating outsiders while wearing materials obtained from beyond his homeland. Power denounces the foreign. Power also shops there. The thought has a dry little smile in it. A scholarly debate continues around the relationship between migration, language change, and political transformation in early Mesopotamia. Some researchers emphasize gradual cultural interaction, others highlight episodes of conquest, state formation, and elite movement. Still others warn that archaeological materials do not always map neatly onto ethnic identity. Pots are chatty, but they do not speak family history fluently. You step into a workshop where imported stone is being shaped into beads. The artisan sits close to the ground, focused and patient. Dust clings to his fingers. The bead is tiny, but it carries a route across mountains, deserts, rivers, and hands. When finished, it may adorn a priestess, a noblewoman, a temple object, or a royal gift. Distant geology becomes local status. This is what trade does. It turns faraway places into intimate things. A shell from the Gulf may rest against a Sumerian wrist. Lapis from distant mountains may gleam in a royal tomb. Copper from outside the plain may become a tool, weapon, or offering. Each object is a foreign memory made touchable. The city absorbs the world and then pretends the final object belongs naturally in its own order. Royal identity works similarly. A dynasty may absorb outsiders, alliances, and conquered elites, then present the result as continuous tradition. The process is not dishonest in a simple sense. Ancient identity was often constructed through office, ritual, language, and loyalty as much as ancestry. A foreign-born person could become part of a local system, while a local rival could be treated as an enemy of cosmic order. Belonging is political, it is also emotional. You stand beside a canal as a boat from downstream arrives. Its crew is sun-darkened, tired and eager for payment. One man wears an amulet unfamiliar to you. Another sings a tune that does not match the city's rhythm. A child on the bank listens, then repeats a phrase badly. Cultural exchange begins in such small thefts. A song crosses faster than an army. A fringe tidbit claims that Sumerian civilization was founded by outsiders carrying advanced bloodlines from a lost land or celestial realm. The claim has no solid support in accepted archaeology, yet the broader idea that Sumer developed through contact with surrounding regions is entirely reasonable. The difference is important. Contact is real. Fantasy can ride on it like a merchant who has not paid dock fees. The city's greatness does not require isolation. It requires connection. This is one of the hidden truths that royal lists tend to soften. Kingship may be presented as a sequence moving from city to city, but real cities are porous. Workers arrive, goods leave, words travel, enemies become neighbours, gods cross borders. A foreign object can become sacred in a local shrine. A stranger can become an ancestor if enough time passes. Humanity's role grows clearer here. People are carriers. They carry grain, stone, metal, songs, diseases, memories, stories, names, and children. They carry more than kings can control. While rulers organize authority from above, ordinary movement reshapes the ground beneath them. The true line of history is not one royal chain, it is a braided cord of countless journeys. You look toward the palace storehouse. Imported objects may be kept there under seal. The king can display them as signs of reach and dominance. Foreign materials prove that his world extends beyond the city walls. Tribute, trade, and plunder all become part of royal image. The more distant the object, the greater the aurath. A crown shines brighter when distance is trapped in it. Yet distance also changes the crown. A ruler who depends on foreign copper, distant stone, outside timber, and migrant labour cannot claim absolute self-sufficiency without a little theatrical effort. The archive may record him as sovereign, chosen, and central. The material world quietly records dependence. It says the king's glory was made from many landscapes. The evening market begins to quiet. Animals are led away. Traders count profits and grievances. A scribe wraps his tablet and looks deeply ready to be done with civilization for the day. The canal darkens as the sun lowers, reflecting ropes, poles, boats, and faces from many places. You feel the royal bloodline dissolve into a wider current, not vanish, dissolve into complexity. Kings still matter, dynasties still form, names still carry claims, but no line exists in isolation. Sumer's veins are filled with marsh water, desert dust, mountain stone, foreign labour, local devotion, and the endless human tendency to move where hope, hunger, danger, or opportunity leads. The Forbidden Library does not reveal a pure ancient strain sealed from the world, it reveals the opposite. The oldest royal stories grew in cities that were always receiving, absorbing, resisting though, and transforming what came from elsewhere. Their kings may have claimed heaven as origin, but their earthly power was fed by roads, rivers, marriages, and strangers at the gate. And perhaps that makes the record more human, not less mysterious. For a line untouched by the world would be simple and lifeless. A line shaped by encounter is harder to read, but closer to truth. Foreign blood, foreign goods, and foreign names did not weaken Sumer's story. They made the story possible, carrying new elements into the ancient cities until even kingship itself became part of a larger movement no wall could entirely stop. The last tablet in the room is not the oldest. That is the first surprise. It rests on a low shelf in a chamber where the air smells of dry clay, old plaster, and the faint sourness of extinguished oil. Its edges are chipped. One corner is gone. The writing is neat enough to suggest training, yet not so perfect that the scribe disappears behind it. A late hand copied ancient memory. That thought settles quietly. You stand beside the tablet and feel time folding strangely. The words may describe primeval kings, drowned ages, sacred cities, and dynasties that claim the favour of heaven. Yet the physical object before you may belong to a later age, when Sumerian was already becoming a language of learning, ritual, and tradition rather than everyday speech. The record is old, but the copy is younger. This is how antiquity often reaches you, not as an original voice, as a voice repeated by someone living much later. A mainstream historical fact is that Sumerian texts continued to be copied long after Sumerian declined as a spoken language. Scholars at the University of Chicago, Yale, and Oxford have studied how scribal culture preserved Sumerian in schools, rituals, literature, and learned traditions. In that setting, older texts could become markers of prestige, identity, and intellectual authority. The late scribe therefore stands in a delicate position. He inherits a tradition he may understand deeply in some ways and imperfectly in others. He can copy signs, honour formats, and preserve revered lines, yet he may also reshape, normalise, misread, or adapt what he receives. Preservation is never a purely innocent act. Even careful hands leave fingerprints. You imagine him seated in a dim room, perhaps in a temple school or administrative archive. His stylus is sharp, his tablet is damp, a master copy lies nearby, maybe broken, maybe difficult, maybe already a copy of a copy. The scribe works by lamplight, repeating names older than his own city's current politics. Outside, a different ruler commands the land. Inside, ancient kings rise again. The scribe does not live in their world, but he keeps their world available. That is a strange responsibility. To copy a king list is to decide that old authority still matters. It may matter for scholarship. It may matter for ritual. It may matter for royal ideology. It may matter because scribal training loves tradition with the stubborn devotion of people who have suffered through it. Whatever the reason, the act gives the past a new body. The tablet is that body. You lean close and study the signs. Some lines may preserve formulas whose meanings are older than the copyist's own social reality. The text has become heritage. It It has also become material that can be used. A later dynasty might find comfort in ancient sequence. A temple might value the connection to sacred antiquity. A scholar might enjoy arranging the deep past into order, because even ancient scholars were not immune to the pleasures of a well-organized list. There is a small danger here. The copyist may preserve what he does not fully possess. A scholarly debate surrounds the transmission of Mesopotamian literary and historical traditions. Some researchers emphasize remarkable continuity across centuries. Others point to variation, reinterpretation, and changing political needs. A careful position recognizes both. Texts can remain recognizably stable while their meanings shift around them, like a statue moved from one room to another. The statue is the same. The shadows change. The last tablet in the room may therefore misunderstand the oldest design it carries. Not foolishly, not lazily, simply because time has moved. The cultural world that first generated a tradition can disappear while the words survive. Later scribes may treat those words with reverence, but reverence is not the same as perfect recovery. You can feel that gap. It opens between clay and origin. The record says kingship moved through cities. The later scribe copies the sequence, but did he know the political memories hidden behind each arrangement? Did he understand why one city was placed before another? Did he sense the original force of numbers that now seemed conventional? Did the flood still tremble for him? Or had it become a familiar divider in a respected text? Perhaps he knew more than you think. Perhaps less. Perhaps the question cannot be answered. A quirky fringe tidbit imagines that late scribes deliberately concealed forbidden knowledge in copies, hiding secret royal codes beneath ordinary lines. There is no accepted evidence for a deliberate encrypted genetic archive. Yet late scribal culture did preserve esoteric traditions, omen series, mathematical learning, ritual instructions, and scholarly lore. To modern eyes, specialized learning can easily look like secrecy. The real secret may be transmission itself. How does a civilization remember something it no longer fully lives? It copies, it teaches, it recites, it assigns old texts to young students, it places revered language in ritual, it keeps old names in official memory. Slowly, the past becomes both preserved and distanced. Like a lamp seen through smoke, you walk along the shelves of late copies. Some texts are myths, some are hymns, some are lexical lists, some are royal traditions. Together, they create a learned landscape where ancient Sumer becomes more than a historical reality. It becomes a cultural ancestor. Later scribes look back toward it as a source of authority, wisdom, and sacred depth. This changes the king list again. It is no longer only about ancient kings. It's also about later people needing ancient kings. The need itself is revealing. A society that copies old royal traditions may be seeking continuity in a changing world. Empires rise, languages shift, cities lose dominance, gods are reinterpreted, political centres move, yet a tablet can claim that the present belongs to a longer chain. It can wrap uncertainty in the cloth of antiquity. Humans are very fond of old cloth, especially when the present feels drafty. The late scribe presses another sign. He is not inventing the whole past from nothing. He is not merely repeating it like an empty machine. He is participating in a chain of memory. His hand stands between disappearance and survival. Without such hands, many ancient names would have vanished entirely. With such hands, the names survive, but not untouched. That is the bargain. Memory preserved is memory altered. This does not make the record worthless. It makes it alive. A dead tradition is not copied. A living tradition changes as it moves. The king list travels through time because later scribes still find it useful, sacred, prestigious, or necessary. Its survival is evidence of continued meaning, so even when that meaning has shifted. You pause beside a damaged section. A missing line leaves a wound in the tablet. The scribe may have copied from a damaged source, or the damage may have happened later. Either way, the gap becomes part of the record you receive. Modern readers must work around it, compare versions, and sometimes admit that a king, number, or phrase has fallen into silence. The last tablet teaches humility. It does not offer the first truth. It offers the surviving trace. In the darkness, the late copyist becomes almost as important as the ancient king. The king may have ruled, or been imagined to rule, in a time placed beyond ordinary reach. The copyist ensures that the name enters another age. He is a secondary creator of memory, not glamorous, not crowned, probably underpaid, though evidence for that particular complaint must remain emotional rather than archival. Still, he matters. The hidden record of Sumerian kings depends on such people. It depends on scribes who copied old texts when the world around them had changed. It depends on institutions that taught dead or learned languages. It depends on the prestige of antiquity and the human fear of losing origins. It depends on reverence strong enough to repeat, and imperfection subtle enough to transform. You look once more at the last tablet. Its surface catches the lamp in shallow ridges. Each sign holds 2 times at once, the time it describes and the time it was copied. Behind those 2 lies the time you bring to it, filled with modern questions about genetics, ancestry, power, myth, and truth. The tablet is not a window, it is a meeting place. That is why it feels forbidden, not because it hides one final answer, but because it reveals how answers are made to survive. Ancient design enters later copying. Later copying becomes modern evidence. Modern evidence becomes new storytelling. At every stage, someone chooses, reads, preserves, misunderstands, and desires. The lamp lowers. The last tablet remains awake. And perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that no one in the chain ever possessed the whole design. The earliest storytellers may have remembered fragments. The first compilers may have arranged them for their own needs. The late scribes may have honoured what they partly understood. Modern scholars may recover only the outline. You stand at the end of that long corridor, holding a copy of a memory, and still the kings speak. The door at the far end is not locked. That feels wrong somehow. After so many tablets, seals, names, numbers, flooded memories, royal women, foreign goods, and scholarly doubts, you almost expect a final barrier, a bronze latch, a guard, a warning sign carved by someone with excellent handwriting and poor social skills. Instead, the door opens easily. The room beyond is plain. No gold waits there. No shining skeleton sits upon a throne. No tablet glows with a message that politely solves the entire ancient world. There are only shelves, baskets, broken labels, and a single long table where several kinds of records have been placed together. The quiet is deeper here because the question has changed. You are no longer asking only who the kings were. You're asking who controlled the story of the Vienne. That is the hidden centre of the Forbidden Library. Power does not survive through blood alone. It survives through permission, memory, repetition, and selection. A ruler may descend from a prestigious line, but if no one records it, proclaims it, blesses it, or believes it, the claim withers, and nobody with a strong archive can become an ancestor. A rightful heir without scribes can vanish into dust. History can be rude like that. On the table lies a royal inscription. It praises a king as mighty, chosen, beloved, victorious, builder, provider, and protector. The words are familiar in tone, because rulers everywhere have enjoyed being described as the solution to problems they sometimes helped create. Ancient royal language was not timid. It wrapped a ruler in cosmic approval until his enemies seemed not merely defeated, but misplaced in the universe. A mainstream historical fact is that Mesopotamian rulers used inscriptions, monuments, seals, hymns, and administrative records to shape public memory. Scholars at major universities have studied these materials as tools of legitimacy, not simple neutral reports. A royal text can preserve events, but it can also arrange them to serve authority. That arrangement is the surat. You step closer to another tablet. It records offerings tied to a ruler's building project. Nearby, a seal impression shows a figure approaching a deity. A fragment of a king list sits beside them, turning separate reigns into a sequence, individually. Each object speaks softly. Together, they become an argument. The king belongs. The king is chosen. The king continues what came before. The king should be remembered. It sounds almost gentle when written in clay, yet behind it lies the sharper reality that alternative memories may have been excluded. Rival claimants disappear. Defeated cities are placed in subordinate order. Women who carried legitimacy fade behind male names. Foreign contributors are absorbed into local glory. Workers become numbers. The archive preserves, but it also filters. That's not a flaw in memory. That is memory behaving politically. You imagine a court scribe seated beside an official, deciding which formula suits the king's latest project. The ruler has built a wall, restored a temple, defeated a rival, or simply survived another year without catastrophe, which should never be underrated. The scribe chooses words that place the event inside sacred continuity. A repair becomes devotion, a campaign becomes justice, a seizure of power becomes restoration. Language smoothed in the knife. A quirky fringe tidbit claims that Sumerian rulers hid a secret biological truth because public records were designed to distract common people from royal origins. There is no accepted evidence for such hidden genetic concealment. Yet the broader instinct behind the idea touches something real. Royal records do not tell everything. They tell what power wanted preserved, and that is a very different thing. The Forbidden Library does not need a conspiracy to be selective. Selection is built into record keeping. Someone decides what deserves clay. Someone decides whose name belongs in the list. Someone decides which city held kingship and which did not. Someone decides whether a queen is named, whether a defeated rival is cursed, whether a worker is counted, whether a flood is placed as divine rupture or remembered as wet disaster. The archive is never innocent. This realization does not empty it of value. It makes it more valuable. A scholarly debate ensues over how to read ancient royal texts against the grain. Some historians emphasize their ideological character and treat them cautiously. Others point out that even propaganda can preserve real events, titles, building works, conflicts, and social structures. The careful reader listens to what the text says, what it avoids, and what its very form reveals. Silence has edges. You can study them. The room contains many such silences. There is the silence of ordinary workers who built walls credited to kings. There is the silence of women whose marriages stabilized thrones. There is the silence of foreign traders whose goods made royal display possible. There is the silence of rival traditions absorbed into a single sequence. There is the silence of damaged lines where time itself has censored the clay. Some silences are accidental, others are useful. You sit at the long table and let the records surround you. A king's name on one tablet, a temple account on another, a seal impression from an official, a royal hymn copied by a student, a later list that claims a grand sequence, a burial object without a name. Each piece seems partial, but together they reveal the machinery of remembered power. The king wanted many things hidden, not always secrets in the dramatic sense. Sometimes he wanted complexity hidden. He wanted messy succession hidden beneath divine order. He wanted a human bargaining hidden beneath heavenly descent. He wanted labour hidden beneath royal building. He wanted violence hidden beneath restoration. He wanted foreign dependence hidden beneath local glory. This is not unusual. It is politics with better clay. You look toward a wall where a faded label has slipped from a basket. The basket may contain ordinary accounts, yet those accounts can expose what grand inscriptions soften. If a king claims to provide abundance, ration records may reveal pressure. If he claims divine favour, omen texts may reveal anxiety. If he claims unity, letters may reveal conflict. The archive allows power to speak, but it can also accidentally betray power. That betrayal is precious. Records created for control can become evidence against control. A tax list might reveal social stress. A labour account might show forced organisation. A royal boast might show insecurity precisely because it boasts too much. The more power insists on its perfection, the more carefully you begin to listen for the crack in its voice. Ancient rulers understood memory well. They knew that being remembered correctly mattered almost as much as ruling effectively. A king who built a temple could place his name in its foundation, praying that later rulers would restore and honour it. A king who conquered could carve victory into stone. A king who claimed ancient descent could anchor himself in a line that made his reign seem inevitable. The future was an audience. The tablets were stage directions. This is where the concept of deoxyribonucleic acid records returns in its most human form. The ancient royal code was never only blood, it was narrative control. A biological line can continue without legitimacy. A political line can claim legitimacy without clean biological continuity. What matters to kingship is recognition. The body must be interpreted, named, blessed, recorded, and accepted. A crown sits on a head. A story holds it there. That story can be rewritten. A usurper can become legitimate through victory, marriage, temple approval, and scribal care. A weak heir can be erased by political collapse. A foreign ruler can adopt local titles and become part of the inherited order. A city can be placed earlier in a list to honour its prestige, or later to serve another design. The blood may matter. The story decides how how much. You feel the unease in that. It means ancestry is never merely ancestry when power touches it. It becomes performance, law, ritual, and memory. People may believe sincerely in sacred descent, yet belief itself is shaped by institutions. Temples teach it, scribes write it, festivals display it, families benefit from it, subjects live beneath it. Over time, the claim feels older than its own construction. The Forbidden Library reveals that construction without destroying its force. It lets you see the beams behind the temple curtain. The structure remains impressive, perhaps even more impressive, because you now understand how much labour held it upright. Kingship was not a simple crown placed on a solitary head, it was an ecosystem of approval. Outside the room, the city continues in imagination. A porter lifts a jar, a priest checks a ritual schedule, a woman negotiates household goods, a child repeats a royal name without understanding the politics inside it, a scribe sharpens a reed. All of them participate, knowingly or not, in the survival of the official story. That is how power hides. In daily life, not only in secret rooms, the deepest secret, then, is not that Sumerian kings possessed impossible blood, it is that their blood, whatever it was, became important because systems made it important. The tablets preserved lineages, but they also manufactured meaning around them. They turned memory into authority, and authority into something that looked ancient enough to obey. You rise from the table. The final room remains plain, almost disappointing, which is exactly why it feels true. There is no single forbidden object. There is a method There is a patient ancient art of deciding what the future will think the past was. Kings wanted their names to outlive doubt. They wanted their reigns to seem woven into heaven, city, temple, and time. Some succeeded, too well, and as you leave that quiet room, you understand the hidden truth with a slower kind of clarity. The Forbidden Library does not merely contain the records of Sumerian kings, it contains the record of how kings become believable. It shows that power depends not only on the body that inherits, but on the hand that writes, the priest who blesses, the city that remembers, and the silence that hides what does not fit. The records fade first at the edges, a corner breaks, a sign loses its final wedge, a king's name becomes uncertain, then partial, then dependent on comparison with another damaged tablet from another room. The ancient line does not end with a trumpet, it thins into dust, hesitation, and scholarly brackets that no sleeping listener needs to see. You stand in the last light of the Kabusto. The shelves recede behind you like rows of sleeping hills. Clay tablets rest where hands place them, or where collapse drop on them, or where later excavators imagined their order from ruin. The air smells of dry earth, lamp smoke, and the faint mineral bitterness of old brick. Nothing moves except the wavering flame. The unfinished lineage begins to reveal itself. It is not unfinished because the scribes failed. They did more than most civilizations could hope. They pressed names into clay. They copied lists. They preserved myths, accounts, hymns, royal claims, and arguments with eternity. They gave modern readers one of the deepest written trails into the first cities of southern Mesopotamia. Yet no archive can preserve the whole human story. A mainstream historical fact remains clear. The Sumerian King List is known through copies and fragments, and its tradition combines remembered cities, royal ideology, mythic time, and political ordering. Scholars at major institutions have treated it as essential evidence for Mesopotamian kingship, while also recognizing its limitations. It is not a simple family register. It is a crafted monument of memory. That is why it breathes. A perfect record might feel dead. This one is damaged enough to remain alive. You move toward a narrow exit where night waits outside. Before leaving, you look back at the long chain of kings. The first rulers stand in impossible time. The flood cuts through them. Kish receives the crown in a more earthly world. Uruk gives you Gilgamesh, restless and afraid of death. Temples carry lineages through ritual. Women preserve the hidden channels of legitimacy. Foreign goods and foreign people enter the system until purity becomes less a fact than a performance. The story has widened beyond a royal list. It has become a map of power. And yet, even this map has blank spaces. You do not know every mother's name. You do not know every rival version of the past. You do not know which oral traditions were lost before clay received them. You do not know what ordinary workers muttered about kingship when no official stood nearby. Perhaps they believed. Perhaps they doubted. Perhaps they were too tired to philosophize after hauling bricks all day. That possibility feels very human. The Forbidden Library cannot recover every voice. It preserves the voices that institutions allowed, needed, or accidentally saved. The result is magnificent and incomplete. Kings appear in sequence, but the world beneath them flickers only through fragments. A rationalist here, a seal there, a broken ornament, a temple offering, a foreign name, a child's practice tablet. The smallest traces keep resisting the grand design. That resistance matters. The hidden record of Sumerian kings is not a single answer, and it is not a proven biological code. It is a layered system of memory, ancestry, sacred office, political need, and human longing. The phrase deoxyribonucleic acid records belongs here as a metaphor, not laboratory fact. The ancient code is cultural. It moves through names, lists, rituals, marriages, cities, numbers, and the repeated claim that authority came from beyond ordinary life. Perhaps that is enough to unsettle you. Perhaps it is more unsettling than a simple secret. A literal hidden bloodline would give the story a clear shape. One could test it, name it, believe it, or reject it, but the Sumerian record gives something vital. It shows how human societies turn descent into destiny. It shows how clay can outlive flesh. It shows how kingship can be presented as heavenly while depending on grain, workers, scribes, women, trade, and fear. The crown is never alone. It is carried by a world. A quirky fringe tidbit still circles the room like a moth. Some imagine that the unfinished lineage points to suppressed evidence of beings from outside humanity, rulers whose true origin was hidden behind myth. That idea is not supported by accepted archaeological research, yet its persistence reveals something important about the tablets. They make ordinary explanations feel insufficient because ancient authority itself was described as extraordinary. The old scribes built mystery into the foundation. They did not need modern theories to do it. They wrote of kingship descending. They counted reigns too vast for ordinary life. They placed a flood between ages. They preserved divine relationships around rulers. They made kings larger in time, larger in art, larger in ritual, and larger in memory. Even without leaving the ground of serious history, you're already standing inside a strange and shadowed structure. The open scholarly debate will continue over details. Researchers will continue asking how the King List developed, how its copies relate, how its numbers work, how real rulers entered myth, and how political traditions were arranged. New discoveries may sharpen the picture. Some questions may remain unanswered forever. The ancient world gives evidence generously, then withholds just enough to keep the mind awake. You step through the doorway. The night outside is blue and still. The city has grown quiet. A dog crosses an alley. Somewhere, a late lamp burns behind a reed screen. The stars hang above the plain with their old indifference. You feel the distance between your body and the people who wrote the tablets, yet you also feel the thread connecting you to them. They wanted to remember, so do you. That desire may be the deepest lineage of all. Not royal blood, not heavenly descent, not the impossible years of antediluvian kings, but the human refusal to let meaning vanish without a trace. The Sumerian scribes pressed their world into clay because bodies fail, voices fade, and power without memory becomes only noise. You listen to the silence. It is not empty. It holds the scratch of styluses, the murmur of students, the footsteps of priestesses, the cries of traders, the grief of Gilgamesh, the rain of the flood, and the dry whisper of tablets lifted after thousands of years. None of these sounds gives a final answer. Together, they create a question large enough to rest inside. Who are we, when our oldest records say that order came from above, yet all its weight was carried below by human hands? Perhaps the story of the Sumerian kings is unfinished, because humanity is still inside the question. Every age writes its own king lists. Every age decides which names deserve monuments, which bodies deserve honour, and which silences can be ignored. We may use glass screens instead of clay tablets, but the desire is familiar. Remember this. Believe this. Let this version survive. The lamp behind you the library remains. Its last shelf holds no final tablet. Only dust where another record may once have rested. That absence is gentle, but powerful. It leaves room for wonder. It leaves room for caution. It leaves room for the possibility that ancient memory is not a locked door, but a corridor, and that you have walked only part of its length. And perhaps the story is not yet complete. The night grows softer now, and the old city loosens its hold. The tablets remain behind you, resting in their quiet rows. no longer demanding that every question be answered. Their clay has endured enough. It does not need you to solve it tonight. You may let the kings drift back into shadow. Let the names become slower. Let the numbers lose their sharpness. Let Eridu return to marsh mist, Kish to wet streets, Uruk to warm brick beneath cooling stars. Let the scribes lay down their reeds. Let the priestesses close the inner doors. Let the traders sleep beside their tied animals, and let the last lamp in the archive bend toward darkness. There is nothing more you need to carry, only the feeling of old earth beneath ancient feet, only the scent of rain on clay, only the knowledge that human beings, long before your own night, looked into the same darkness and tried to leave a mark that would survive them. Perhaps that is enough. Breathe slowly. The forbidden library is closed, but not lost. It waits in museums, in fragments, in careful hands, in quiet minds, and in the patient sleep of history itself. Somewhere beneath all its mysteries, the ancient world is not shouting. It is whispering that memory is fragile, power is temporary, and even kings become dust unless someone remembers their names. The stars remain above the plain. The river moves without hurry. The clay cools in the dark, and you may rest now, gently, as the oldest kings return to silence, as the last tablet settles into shadow, and as the unfinished lineage drifts onward through the deep, calm night